Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
One Piece Fates Intertwined by Demonheart 12. What if the time difference between Luffy and Robin was much smaller? What would happen if he arrived on her island somehow before the Buster Call happened? How will their presence in each other's lives affect each other? Follow their adventures as they grow together and sail the seas in hopes of achieving their dreams. I don't own anything. Adios.
The swordsman resolve. Everyone was shocked to see that the greatest swordsman in the world was the individual that destroyed Don Krieg's fleet into oblivion. The mentioned man was now fuming in the mouth as he looked at the swordsman. His men were all panicking as they looked at the man that gave them nightmares besides their captain. The Straw Hat crew was looking at him with interest, especially Zoro, who felt that this was a chance from heaven to test himself against the world's greatest swordsman. Zeph was looking at him stoically, wondering what those idiots did to earn themselves the world's greatest swordsman wrath. He then chuckled to himself as he looked at Krieg's men, and said, "What did you exactly do to earn his wrath? Wake him from his sleep?" Zeph asked Krieg's men, who were angry at the cook for making fun of them. The pirates then began to yell in anger at Zeph, saying, "Don't say something so ridiculous. This man killed so many of us, just for interrupting his sleep. Are you insane?" Mihawk, who was calmly sitting in his boat, said in a calm voice, "He's not wrong, you know. The only reason I attacked you is that you woke me up from my sleep. If you didn't, you might have survived." Truth be told, Mihawk was a simple man. He didn't do much given that no one was his equal when it came to swordsmanship, so he usually drank wine or trained. He fought on occasion any rookie swordsman who thought that they can measure up to him, only for them to be cut down and destroyed faster than they thought. Krieg then looked at the swordsman with a scowl as he said, "What are you doing here? Didn't you already destroy my fleet? What business do you even have here?" Mihawk looked at him with an uninterested look as he sighed, saying, "Nothing much, but I was bored, so I followed my prey to here." Everyone was then shocked that Mihawk was so bored that he followed the people who had destroyed them just to finish them off, as if he didn't have anything better to do with his time. One Krieg's man then yelled in frustration at the swordsman, "What are you, bastard? Leave us alone already." The man then lifted his gun and starts shooting at the swordsman, hoping to kill him, but the result didn't please him. As the bullets barreled toward the swordsman, he merely lifted his sword from his back and hit the bullets with them, sending them flying away, shocking the Krieg pirates. "What the hell did he just do?" one of the pirates asked, fearful of someone who can hit bullets with his sword. The voice of Zoro then answered his question as he approached them. He simply redirected the trajectory of his bullets by moving the edge of his blade. No matter how you shoot at him, it won't change a thing. The pirates then yelled at him, "Don't be ridiculous. No one can do that. It's impossible." Zoro ignored the man as he looked at Mihawk, and said in admiration, "In my entire life, I never seen anyone that handled a sword with such grace. It's truly impressive." The other swordsman looked at him with little interest as he said, "A sword that has no grace is no sword at all." "I see, you're truly as good as they say," Zoro said as he now stood on a piece of Don Krieg's boat that was still intact and wasn't destroyed by the swordsman. He looked around at the ship, and said, "You're the person that destroyed this ship, didn't you?" Mihawk nodded his head at Zoro as he said, "Yes indeed. They interrupted my nap, so they had to pay. But why are you asking all these questions?" Krieg's men then looked at Zoro and began to scan him greatly, and what they saw made them pale. The realization then hit them like a ton of bricks. They now knew that they were here with not one monster but two: Dracula, Mihawk, and Rorona Zoro. "Look, he has 3 swords. One of the men spoke in fear as he looked at Zoro. "That's him. The demon walking on earth, pirate hunter Zoro." Zoro then, with a smile etched on his face, said to Mihawk, "I still can't believe it. I said all the way sailing just to meet you, and you've now come to me." But still you didn't answer my earlier question. Why do you seek me out?" Mihawk asked with his trademark bored expression. Zoro simply replied as he tied his bandana to his head, "To become the greatest swordsman in the world, I must defeat you." Back with Nami, she used the distraction Mihawk's entrance caused to slip with Usopp unnoticed. She then boarded the boat with the boy, who began whining, "Why did Luffy send me with you to fight the fishman? I don't want to die. I'm still too young to be eaten by them." The girl promptly whacked him on the head as she said, "Calm down already. You aren't going to be eaten by them. You're going to stay at my sister's place, while I sort out some business with Arlong, got it?" They then heard Yosaku say, "Hey, guys, look, it seems that Big Bro Zoro is talking to the new arrival." They then looked at him, and Johnny seemed to recognize him on the spot as he said, "Dude, that's the man that Big Bro has been looking for. I mean, he told himself, that's Dracula Mihawk." Yosaku then smiled, "Really? Then that means Big Bro can finally beat him and become the greatest swordsman in the world." Nami then facepalmed at how naive those two idiots were. She knew this was a battle that Zoro was going to lose, and severely at that. "Why? Simple, she had heard tales about Mihawk's strength either through Arlong, or some other swordsmen who fought him and lived to tell the tale and get tricked by her so she can steal their money. She then looked at Zoro was talking with him, and seriously hoped he doesn't do anything too stupid such as fighting him, but given how he was talking with him, it suggested otherwise. Zoro wanted to fight him to test himself. She can't blame him for following his ambitions, but she thought that it was a little bit reckless for him to do that. She then looked at Usopp who was shivering as he looked at Mihawk, so she said, "Is there anything that doesn't frighten you?" The boy then said, "Hey, you can't blame me." He then pointed to his eyes and said, "I mean, look at him, it's like you're looking at my soul." The girl rolled her eyes as she looked back at them, but then Johnny and Yosaku said, "Can we stay and watch, please?" The girl looked at them. She didn't feel comfortable being late for her date, but as long as she arrived on the due day, it wasn't going to be a problem if she was a couple of hours late for that. She then said, "Fine, but only a little since I have to go." The boys thanked her profusely as they went to the railings of the ship, and watched the two swordsmen interact. Nami then said as she looked in Zoro's direction, "I have a seriously bad feeling about this." Silence enveloped the place, as everyone looked at Zoro who just called Mihawk out to a duel. The man in question then said, "And why should I do that?" "You said you have free time, right?" Zoro asked as he looked at him, "So, why not have a duel with me?" Everyone then wondered what will be the outcome of a duel between the world's greatest swordsman and Zoro, the creator of the three swords style. Mihawk, on the other hand, looked at Zoro and only one thought came to his mind, and it was weak. The boy in front of him was like all those who have challenged him before. Nonetheless, he said, "Very well then." He then stepped from his boat and boarded the remains of the ship that the Krieg pirates were holding onto as he looked at Zoro saying, "But just for your knowledge, any component swordsman would back away, right? As it can be felt through our skills and levels without even crossing our blades, but yet you stand strong against me." He then added, "Why? Is it from your conviction or ignorance?" The three-style swordsman then pulled out two of his swords as he looked at Mihawk saying, "No, it comes from my ambition and a promise that I plan to fulfill to a friend." The man finally drew his third sword and placed it into his mouth as he admitted, "In all honesty, I never thought I would meet you here of all places, or this early on, but I can't waste such an opportunity." Mihawk Mary said, "Such a waste of time if you ask me." Zeph then stood and rubbed his chin. "I wonder now what will happen when those two clashes with each other." He knew that the victor was going to be Mihawk, but he was sure the boy also knew that, so he concluded that the boy wanted to test out himself against his ultimate goal and see how far he was. Sanji, meanwhile, stood in shock watching the idiot throw away his life against someone who he could tell just by looking at him that he was stronger, but why was following his dream that drastic that he was willing to throw away his life? Nami on the boat sat as she watched. She knew this was going to end badly, not just badly, but what can she do? It's not like he'll listen to her. Luffy then looked at Robin and asked, "Who do you think will win?" The blackhead then said, "It's clear that Mihawk will without a shadow of a doubt. Zoro is good, but Mihawk is even better. There is no way he can keep up with him." He then bit her lip as she said, "I think we should stop him." "No, what? But why?" "Because that's Zoro's dream. I can't tell him not to follow it. We all agreed to follow our dream even if it kills us, so we just have to wait and see what happens." Luffy answered. Robin understood what he meant. She didn't like it, but she understood. This was Zoro's dream. They had no right to interfere with it, even if it meant that he dies today. They then heard Zoro yell, "What kind of trick are pulling here?" They then saw Mihawk pull a small blade from his necklace and point it toward Zoro, who seemed to be boiling in anger at the perceived insult. Mihawk then explained, "Young man, I'm not a brute who goes all out on prey. It's unwise to try and kill a fly with a cannon." He then took a more serious look on his face. "Even though you are a well-known swordsman here, the East Blue is the weakest of the seas. In the Grand Line, you're just another second-class swordsman who doesn't know any better." The man then had a sad expression on his face as he apologized, "Though I am sorry that I don't have a smaller blade, since this may also be considered overkill for a small fry like you." This made Zoro's mind go over the edge as he tried to run towards the swordsman to try and strike him down, but he felt something holding him to the ground. He then looked down and saw 4 disembodied hands. He then turned toward Robin saying, "Hey, what happened to not interfering with my dream?" The girl then told him, "First calm down, so you can do better. Don't let your rage control you, Zoro. It will make you fight badly." Mihawk then added, "What she is saying is true. A swordsman must never lose to his rage." Zoro then took a deep breath, letting out some air as he calmed his breath. He then nodded to Robin, who let him go. He then said to himself, "If he thinks that a small knife can keep me down, then I'll just have to prove him wrong." He then looked toward his goal and dream saying, "Now it begins." And with that, he dashed toward Mihawk, who seemed still as uninterested as he first came here, but Zoro wanted to prove him wrong. The young swordsman lifted his swords toward the older one, as he crossed his 2 blades with the third one being horizontal in his mouth, as he yelled at his opponent, "Onigiri." Mihawk saw the young man running toward trying to slash him. He had to admit that the move wasn't bad per se, but it needed some sharpening for it to become stronger. However, that hit was anything from strong or even able to make him budge a centimeter. He lifted his small dagger and put it in a place where all the blades meet together. This shocked everyone, especially Zoro, who just used one of his strongest attacks only for it to be stopped by something so small that it couldn't even be classified as a kitchen knife. The young swordsman tried to move, but it was impossible. He wondered how the man was able to stop him with just this small knife. He looked at him and pressed even further to move, but he couldn't, so he yelled, "How the hell are you able to stop me with this?" Young man, as I said earlier, this is the weakest sea, so compared to someone who lived his entire life on the Grand Line, you're weak. Mihawk answered Zoro's question, making Zoro angry, but he calmed his breath down as he looked at him, before disengaging the older swordsman and retreating to prepare another attack to try and defeat him. In this world, you're like a little frog in its well, but now you'll taste how the world is like. Meanwhile, the others were shocked by what was happening. The Krieg pirates looked at this fight with wide eyes as one of them said, "That's impossible. He's able to stop Zoro, but this guy is said to be like a devil." "Tell me about it. This guy is a monster if he's able to stop Zoro the pirate hunter." On the ship with Nami looked at the fight with interest as she saw the fight begin. This fight was either going to end with Zoro being hurt badly or said man becoming dead. She looked at Zoro's shocked expression when the world's greatest swordsman stopped him. Usopp, on the side, was trembling in fear as he watched the fight. He was asking himself how was Zoro able to stand up to this man and fight him, and he was seriously afraid for Zoro's health. Johnny and Yosaku on the side were sharing on Zoro, as they fully believed that Zoro would be able to defeat Mihawk. They then said, "Don't give up, big bro Zoro. Get him, you can defeat him." Zoro looked at Mihawk, before charging at him as he yelled, preparing another attack, Toragari. The attack was launched at the older swordsman, but just like the previous attack, Mihawk stopped him, saying, "Still weak." Finally, Zoro's mind snapped as he began to the swordsman with reckless abandonment. The strikes were all blocked by Mihawk, but this caused Zoro to be stunned as he said, "No, this can't be happening. This is impossible." Zoro couldn't get it. He knew Mihawk was stronger than him, but was he really that stronger? It was impossible. He knew that there was a gap between them, but now it seemed more like an endless chasm that he somehow needed to jump through and reach to the other side. He then asked himself if the gap between them was this high. Could it be that this man was so much stronger than him? Mihawk was now impressed with the younger swordsman. Perhaps this duel wasn't a waste of time anymore. The man then looked at the boy who was fighting with such strength and ferocity, adding to that persistence to continue, even though he knew now that he was outclassed by the older one. Mihawk then exclaimed with a straight face, "Such strength and ferocity. I need to know something, young man." He then asked as he looked at Zoro, "Why are you fighting? What burdened your soul so much?" He then trailed as he added, "Weakling." Zoro then yelled as charged, saying, "I won't give up." This was met by the man dodging him and hitting the back of his neck, causing the young man to fall to the ground as the sword in his mouth almost fell out. Back with Luffy, the rubber man looked at Zoro with discomfort as he tried to control himself. He then looked and saw Robin fidgeting slightly in her place. He then grabbed her hand and massaged it, saying, "I know, but we can't do anything at this point." The girl sighed, knowing that her boyfriend was correct and that they couldn't stop Zoro at this point, but she couldn't help but be worried. Zoro, even though he wouldn't show it, was their friend. She prayed that he could make it out of it in one piece. Back on the boat, Johnny and Yosaku were grabbed by Nami, who was keeping them back, so they wouldn't jump and join the fight. She truly began to regret staying here. It was seriously annoying with the idiotic duo trying to commit suicide. "Let us go, we need to go and help big bro Zoro," Johnny said as he struggled to escape from Nami's grip and join the fight. "Yeah, let's us go. We need to go and beat that guy up for hurting big bro Zoro," Yosaku said as he wiggled in Nami's grip. This caused the girl to hit them over the head with her fists, causing over their heads. Nami then yelled at them with a demonic face with shark teeth, "And what are you going to do? Die?" Nami then added, "Zoro is 10 times stronger than you, and he can't even leave a hit on the guy. What do you clowns hope to achieve? You're most likely to become dead weight on the guy as he fights with him." "But we can't leave big bro like this," Johnny said in protest as he tried to reach the railings, but was stopped when Nami stumped on his leg, saying, "Don't do anything stupid." Yosaku then sat calmly, knowing that fighting against Nami will most likely cause him more pain than it was worth in the first place. Nami then sighed as she said, "Look, Zoro is my friend, and as much as I'm worried for him, this is his dream, and I can't just stop him. He wanted to fight this guy alone, and he can't do anything about it. The best we can do is we hope that he gets out of it with the least amount of damage possible." The two men then nodded their heads, repeatedly understanding Nami's words as they looked back to the fight occurring between the world's greatest swordsman and their brother. Back with Zoro, the green-haired swordsman then stood up as he looked at Mihawk and said, "I won't stop right now." He then adjusted himself and adjusted his blade, saying, "I didn't come this far to give up." He then charged at Mihawk, yelling, "So you better take me seriously, you." The sound of Zoro was then silenced as the sound of flesh being pierced. Replayed. Zoro then looked down at his chest as he saw that the small blade Mihawk wielded was now stuck in his chest, so he coughed out blood from his mouth. Everyone around them was stunned, as Luffy looked with worry etched on his face as Robin turned her face away, unable to watch the fight anymore since one of her friends was almost killed right at this moment. Nami was now looking with fear at Zoro, who was hanging on the Mihawk's small blade. Usopp closed his eyes in fear, as he didn't have the heart to look at the scene anymore. Johnny and Yosaku were shocked that someone managed to get a hit on their big bro, and they knew that they couldn't do anything at this point. Mihawk looked at Zoro. He then began to wonder why the boy didn't back away. At this point, most of his opponents would have backed away by now to keep their lives, but this young man didn't even back away from what could be his death. Even when he only needed a small push to kill him, the boy didn't show fear or back away. The older swordsman looked at the young man. "Young man, why didn't you back away from this?" He waited for Zoro, who finally answered, "I don't know, but if I backed away now, I would lose everything I have. I can't just back away, no matter what the circumstances are," the young swordsman said as he was thinking about the promise he made with his old friend Kuina. He remembered the day they fought and both of them made a pact to become the world's greatest swordsman. He then remembered the day she died, and how he swore to fight for her to become the world's greatest swordsman. Backing away at this point is worse than defeat. Mihawk then looked at Zoro as he observed the young man and said, "Even if defeat here, in this case, means death?" the older swordsman asked, trying to test the young man's resolve. The young swordsman then said, "I prefer death than backing away." Mihawk smiled as he said, "That's well said, young man. Now tell me, what is your name?" The swordsman then removed the small blade from Zoro's chest and put it back into his place. Mihawk then reached to his sword attached to his back and pulled it. "Rorona Zoro. I shall remember it." He then looked at Zoro and said, "As a gesture of respect from one swordsman to another, I will down you use my sword." Zoro looked at him with eagerness, as Zoro then began to prepare another attack to hit Mihawk with it. He then begins to put the two blades in a vertical position with the mouth blade in a horizontal position. He then jumps at Mihawk as he says, "Three sword style, secret technique, 3,000 worlds." Mihawk then dashed toward Zoro and brought down their sword toward the younger swordsman. The two then crossed paths as their blades crossed with each other. When the two managed to bypass each other, it looked for a moment as if Zoro was able to defeat the older swordsman, but moments later Zoro then coughed blood. As the two blades in his hands shattered into bits and pieces, Zoro himself began to put his white sword away as he said, "I've been defeated." Everyone was floored by this as everyone looked at Mihawk, who had defeated Zoro the pirate hunter, the strongest man in the sea by far. Both Luffy and Robin at this point were worried about their friend, as they looked at him when he was struck by Mihawk's sword. On the boat, Nami was shaking in fear, feeling worried for Zoro, with Usopp trying to keep calm after seeing Zoro being struck down by Mihawk. Mihawk then ran towards Zoro, who simply stood up and turned around facing the older swordsman with his arms opened wide. This caused the swordsman to ask, "What are you doing?" Zoro smirked as he said, "Scars on the back of a swordsman is a shame." Mihawk smiled at this as he replied, "Well said." He then slashed Zoro, causing a huge wound to appear on the younger man's chest. Zoro then fell backward into the water as Yosaku and Johnny jumped from the boat into the water and raced toward their big bro to save him from drowning. Sanji looked at Zoro as he fell into the water, but he couldn't get what happened out of his mind. Why risk so much for his ambition if it meant death? Why take on someone much stronger than you? Sanji then yelled, "It's simple, throw away your ambitions." Mihawk then turned his head to the side as he lifted his blade and blocked a strike from Luffy, who looked at him in anger. The older man then said, "Don't worry, young man, your friend over there isn't dead. He is still too young to die, he has much more things to do." Luffy then turned his head and looked to the side as he saw Johnny and Yosaku lift Zoro from the water, as the latter began to cough water from his lungs. The swordsman then yelled, "Luffy, can you hear me?" "Yeah, I can hear you," Luffy replied to the swordsman. "I'm sorry I worried you today," Zoro said as tears began to fall from his eyes. He then added, "You said that the Pirate King doesn't need anything less from the best, right?" The young swordsman then lifted his blade to the air as he said, "That's why I promise you that I won't ever lose again." Luffy smiled as Zoro added, "Do you have a problem with that, Pirate King?" Luffy then yelled, "Of course not." He was happy that this didn't hamper his friend's ambitions, and he was still as passionate as ever about being a swordsman. Mihawk smirked as he thought that this trip he took to follow the prey that managed to elude him wasn't a bust at all. He managed to find something that truly intrigued him. It was nothing but a small hatchling. However, this small hatchling had the potential to grow and become a huge dragon that soared over the skies. He then looked to the downed swordsman and lifted his sword into the air as he said, "Rorona Zoro, I will remember this name. I Dracula Mihawk, I will wait for you on the top, and see what will become of you. Now go find your true world, Zoro. Go find yourself. I will wait for you to forge your will and the fierce conviction of yours so that one day you succeed in surpassing my sword, and surpassing me." Everyone was shocked that the world's greatest swordsman just acknowledged Zoro, as one person said, to think Dracula Mihawk of all people would say this. The swordsman then looked at Luffy as he asked the rubber boy, "What is your ambition, boy?" Luffy looked at him and said with his usual confidence, "I'm going to become the Pirate King." Mihawk then smiled as he said, "I see, a goal that is even harder than surpassing me." The world's greatest swordsman then smiled as he casually walked to his boat and said, "I think you both make a good team." He then said to Luffy, "IW both one day again." Luffy responded by flashing the swordsman a thumbs up. But as Mihawk was about to leave, a voice called out to him. He turned around only to see Krieg smirking at him as he said, "Hey Mihawk, last time I checked you came all this way to hunt me down, isn't that right?" The swordsman then said, "Correct, but I found something that interested me more, so I can say that I got my fair share of excitement for one day, so count your blessings before I change my mind." Krieg then smirked as he said, "Well, to be honest, it's true that you may have your fair share, but sure didn't." He then activated his armor as he pointed every gun he had on it toward the swordsman, who merely scoffed. Meanwhile, Krieg's men were trembling with fear as they asked themselves why their boss was picking a fight with this monster. Krieg then said, "So how about before you live, you die?" He finished as he launched several bullets and projectiles toward the man who said, "He never learns, does he?" The swordsman then moved his blade against the waves, blocking the attack, but at the same time disappearing from the area. But this move of his caused the sea itself to become disturbed as huge waves occurred, causing everyone to hold onto something. Luffy then looked around and saw that Nami was still there, so he shouted at her, "Nami, what are you doing here? Quickly go to your home island, so nothing happens to it," he said as he extended his arms to Johnny and Yosaku, throwing them on board. He then added, "Don't worry about Zoro, I'm sure the chefs have someone who can help him," he said as he grabbed the downed swordsman, and jumped back onto the Baratie, handing Zoro to a couple of chefs who took him to treat his wounds, with Robin following them. He gave Nami one final look, and said, "Go and don't worry, we'll be right behind. I promised I will help you, and I will keep my word." The girl nodded her head as she yelled at Usopp to ready the sails, causing they were going to move. She then told Johnny and Yosaku to help her handle the steering wheel while she navigated the ship. It only took a few moments, but the ship was now on its course, and away from the site. Krieg looked around as he scoffed, "TCH, the coward ran away." He then looked back at the chefs as he said, "Well, now that this punk ran away, let's get back to business, shall we, gentlemen?" He then looked at his men, who managed to recollect themselves after the initial beat down they took, before the world's greatest swordsman showed up, so he said, "Well men, since that's over, go grab that ship, and you better not fail this time. Good thing, nothing too bad happened to it, or else all our effort would amount to nothing today." He then began to stroke his chin and began to imagine who this ship will come in handy in his escapades in the Grand Line. One of his men then came up and said, "But boss, what will we do if we came up to another monster like Mihawk in the Grand Line?" This man was then effectively shot through the head, as Don Krieg yelled, "Are still afraid of him? Don't make me laugh. You honestly believe that he can cut a galleon? He must have had a devil fruit on him." The pirate captain then began to explain that the Grand Line is infested with devil fruit users. "But the man you see over there, red-legged Zeph, is one of the few men who went to the Grand Line, and lived to tell the tale. So go, and take this boat so we can take it, and Zeph's shipping log, so I can become the Pirate King." This got the desired effect as his men became excited at the prospect of having another crack at the Grand Line. Luffy, who was standing with Zeph, then said, "Don't forget our deal, old man." Zeph then smirked, saying, "Only if you get rid of those brats. You can take the eggplant, not that I need him anyways." Luffy then smiled as he stretched his arms to two ledges, as he said, "Gum gum rocket." The rubber boy was then sent flying toward the Krieg pirates and managed to take down a couple of them, before wrapping his hand around a wooden beam to prevent himself from falling into the water. He then saw Krieg, and he said, "Get ready because I'm about to kick your butts from here to the Grand Line." The huge man then scoffed as he said, "You? Here? And on water? Tell me, are you devil fruit users weak in water?" Luffy then nodded his head as he said, "Yeah, we kinda are." This caused a couple of yells from the chef's side to echo as they said, "Don't tell him your weakness." Everyone then heard a loud crashing sound in the waves, and they looked to the side as they heard Crane say, "Whoever doesn't want to die, move to the side." Patty then said, "This is Baratie's secret weapon." Everyone looked at it, and began to wonder what was the thing that just appeared. The thing appeared to be a miniature version of the Baratie, with its head equipped with cannons and water peddlers. Inside it, Patty and Crane were arguing how to move the thing, before finally managing to agree. The two then went full speed ahead as they opened its mouth, and began firing cannonballs at the pirates, who fled for dear life. The two then went to kill Don Krieg, as Patty said, "Hey Krieg, get ready to taste today's special, cannonball fish with a side of fine powder." Krieg didn't acknowledge them, as they fired the cannonballs at him. The air was then covered by smoke, but when it was cleared up, it showed Krieg in tip-top condition, as he held the miniature ship with one hand while looking at it, shocking everyone. Krieg then said, "I'm the Don Krieg, future Pirate King." This caused Luffy to protest as Krieg then continued. I have no time to play around with small children like yourselves. He finished as he lifted the ship into the air and threw it toward the Baratie. Sanji then began smoking as he said, time for work. He then disappeared from among the chefs as he then appeared beside the fish-like ship, before kicking it causing it to change its course, as everyone gaped at him for his strength. The small ship then landed into the fins of the floating restaurant, as Patty and Crane came bursting out of it claiming Sanji was trying to kill them. After that display of power, Krieg yelled at his men, everyone, go and take the boat. His men then began to run toward their quarry, but the chefs stood in their way as they fought tooth and nail to protect the place. But the less experienced chefs in fighting were defeated rather quickly, so Patty yelled, are you going to let a couple of small-time fries beat you? He then lifted a pitchfork while Crane held a knife-like thing. Both of them then ran toward the pirates who claimed that this was going to be an easy win for them but were met by the two cooks' strength which caught them off guard. Meanwhile, in the water, a huge round metal plate was floating to the floating restaurant. When it reached it, the plate put a hand on the edge and lifted itself as it revealed a heavily plated man who proceeded to beat the stuffing out of both Patty and Crane. The man then said in a victorious tone, I'm Pearl, the Iron Wall of the Krieg pirates, and no one has ever defeated me in combat. One of the pirates then tried to kill Patty using his kitchen knife only for Sanji to interfere, and send him flying with a couple of his friends into Pearl, as he said that a knife is a soul of a chef, so it can't be handled by idiots like him. 5 pirates were then irritated by Sanji, as they began to attack him, but the man in black then seemed to disappear from their sight only to reappear in front of them and kick them hard in the abdomen causing them to wail in agony. Pearl then said, to take 5 of them at once, and only with your feet, or just lazy, or is it some kind of weird policy you have going around here? Sanji smiled as he said, a cook's hands are only meant for cooking, so no I don't use them for fighting. He then lit a cigarette as he said to Pearl, but if you feel left out, then don't worry your turn is coming right up. Pearl then laughed at Sanji and began to as he explained how it was impossible to defeat had managed to lay a hand on him due to his skills, and how his iron defense gives him the perfect protection. Sanji then said, well, I guess there's a first time for everything, don't you agree with me? Luffy on the other hand began to wonder what was going on, but a mouth bloomed on his shoulder, and said, Luffy watch out. Krieg is about to attack you. The rubber looked and saw that Krieg was holding a mace, and smirking at him. The rubber boy being as careful as possible jumped in the air before the mace hit the sail he was on, before landing on the remains of the ship again. Robin from a window in the upper levels sighed in relief. The rubber boy then stretched his arm back and tried to hit Krieg, but the arm kept stretching till it reached the restaurant. When he tried to hit Krieg with it he evaded it, but something else caught their attention. Meanwhile, Pearl was still going on about he was invincible, as he blocked an attack from Sanji, but suddenly something hit him in the back of the head causing him to smack his head against one of the shields that he was using to fight Sanji. Pearl then went eerily quiet. Sanji looked at him with confusion. The man put his hand to his face and noticed that blood was flowing from his nose. This caused all the Krieg pirates to panic, and even Krieg himself said, ah damn it, this happened at the worst time possible. The armored man then began to shake uncontrollably as he crouched on the ground. Sanji looked at him and said, what's wrong with you? Are you some kind of baby throwing a tantrum? The guy then stood up and looked directly at his hand as he saw the blood and said, blood, my invincible shield has failed me. The Krieg pirates then began to run away in fear as some of them began to beg for Pearl not to lose it. The armored man then began to hit his shields together, as he screamed loudly, danger, danger. Don Krieg then said from the ship, Pearl, calm down already, it's just some blood. The man then kept clinging his shields together as he kept repeating the word, danger, but then the entirety of his shield burst into blue flames as he screamed even louder, danger. Everyone was shocked by the sudden development, while the Krieg pirates were afraid, as this was Pearl's defensive mechanism that he used whenever he felt threatened by anyone. Pearl then yelled, stay away from me, I'm the walking danger, this is fire. The man then launched from his body flaming pearls towards Sanji, but the cook then skillfully evaded the hits aimed at him, as the pirates screamed for their life afraid that they might get caught in the crossfire. All this while, Luffy and Krieg stood watching the chaos unfold, as Krieg said, Pearl, you damned fool, don't you dare ruin this ship. Luffy replied, he seems crazy. Pearl meanwhile only screamed, burn, and was throwing his flaming pearls at everyone and everything causing a huge fire to appear on the ship as people were now put between two choices, either fire and the sea. Seeing that his home was being threatened with being burned and get destroyed, Sanji going went into action as he raced toward Pearl against the other cook's warning, and jumped into the air above him. The man briefly looked at him as he heard Sanji say, this ship isn't yours to burn. Sanji then aimed a kick at Pearl's face, but the man blocked it with a shield. A lot of people were astonished that Sanji just walked up to the line of fire without even blinking, but the blonde man only chuckled as he said, what kind of chef do you take me for? I deal with fire regularly, so I can't afford to be afraid of a small candle flame. Pearl then attacked Sanji as he thrusted 2 shields forward, but Sanji evaded and replied by sending a kick to Pearl's face. The Krieg pirates watched in shock as Pearl was knocked to his back, and one of them said in shock, he actually did, and passed Pearl's shields. One of them then whistled saying, "That's one tough cook, but this just got a whole lot worse." Sanji had a smirk on his face as he saw Pearl rise and yell at him, "How dare you attack me? How dare you kick me in the face?" The man then started slamming his armors together as he said, "Big danger, flaming pearls." He then sent out a huge number of flaming pearls toward the entrance of the ship where Zeph was standing. The cooks panicked about Zeph's safety, but the man merely waved his leg in the air and blew out the flames on the pearls, causing them to land harmlessly beside them. Luffy and the other chefs were impressed by Zeph's skills, but Krieg was annoyed with Pearl and the man's attempt to sink the ship, so he said, "Before you even think about burning the ship, I'll sink you all." The man then threw his mace at Pearl, but this attempt was interrupted by Luffy, who said, "Gum gum whip." The leg intercepted the mace, sending it to a nearby sail and causing it to crack and fall onto Pearl's head, causing the man to pass out for the time being. They all stood in shock at the rubber man's strength as he was able to redirect the hit, but then they heard a groan. They then heard someone say, "Everyone stop right now." They all looked and saw Jin holding Zeph at gunpoint as the man said, "I don't want to kill anybody, as I said before, loyalty." An eerie silence filled the air as everyone looked at Jin, who was holding Zeph at gunpoint. The elder man had his wooden peg broken, as he was face down on the ground with a pistol pointed to his head. Jin held the gun tightly as he said once more, "No one move, or else the old man gets it." Sanji looked in complete shock as he saw Jin holding the man he considered a father to the ground. He was beyond afraid. He yelled at Jin, "Jin, why are you doing this? Let the old geezer go alone." Jin looked at him with a dead look in his eyes as he said, "Leave the boat to the dawn, and I will let him go, or else he gets it." Sanji then yelled, "Never." The blonde man then clenched his fist in frustration as he looked at Jin, who was pushing the gun against Zeph's head. "Why are you doing this?" Jin then simply said, "I already told you. Don is the strongest man alive, so I'm just following my captain's orders. I simply want to help him become the Pirate King. And if taking this boat helps him reach his goal, then so be it." Sanji tried to move, but Jin then yelled, "Don't even think about it." Jin then looked at the ground with frustration as he said, "Why don't you go away, Sanji? I told you I don't want anyone to be killed. Leave this boat, and take the old man with you. And I'm sure you can start your business somewhere else. Why risk everything against someone who is the strongest man in the world?" Sanji didn't say anything, but he only looked down to the ground as he growled. He then said as he lit a cigarette, "I will not allow anyone to take this old man's dream." He then opened his arms and said, "Aim your pistol at me." Jin only looked sad, but he couldn't say anything as something then beat down on Sanji. They all looked and saw Pearl standing above the blonde man, as he held a huge smug grin on his face. The man then yelled, "Since you love this restaurant so much, why don't you die for it?" He then began to mumble, "To think that I felt threatened by you at some point." The man then looked at Sanji, who was on the ground bleeding from his forehead. He then said, "Stay down if you know what's good for you." He then saw Sanji slowly standing up. The man smiled a little as he lifted his shields and smacked Sanji with them across the head, causing the man to fall backward from pain. He then began laughing as he saw Sanji was downed and looked at Jin as he said, "Good work, Jin. Now when I kill the blonde runt, you do your best to kill the old geezer. This way their resistance will falter, and we can get the boat without any trouble." The aforementioned man looked away from Pearl, who was walking to Sanji. Sanji raised his head from the ground only for Pearl to come and kick him across the chin, sending him sailing across the ground, as the armored man then said, "Not so funny now that the shoe is on the other foot." Sanji growled as blood dripped from his face, "Shut up, you bastard. I won't allow anyone to harm this man's dream as long as I can breathe." He was then punched with a shield from Pearl, who laughed smugly, Yeah, sure. Keep saying this cause you're about to die in a couple of minutes. It would have been better if you ran away when you had the choice." The chef, seeing that Sanji was being beaten without him doing anything to stop the abuse, caused Patty to yell, "What are doing, you idiot? Stand up and fight." Sanji growled at Patty as he said, "Shut up. If I fight him, the old man will be killed. Go and try to free him, so I can beat this jerk and protect this place." Jin then yelled at the top of his lungs, "Why, Sanji? Why are you making this so hard?" The blonde then looked at him and replied, "It's you who is making this unfair." Jin bit his tears back as he said, "Just do as I tell you and leave. Everyone will be safe, and no one dies." He then heard Sanji wheeze as he said, "Never." He looked and saw an expression of determination. "This boat is the geezer's pride and joy, so I can't with a good conscience just go away and leave you to do whatever you want with it." Everyone was shocked at how Sanji was talking about Zeph, and some of the chefs began to whisper as they said, "But doesn't Sanji hate Zeph?" Other whispers began to echo as they were confused as to why Sanji was fighting so much for someone they thought he hated. Sanji then said, "I already took everything from him." He then began to list the things he took from the old man: his power, his dreams, his hope, his life, "but at least I can protect this boat with everything I have." Zeph, who looked at Sanji with extreme concern in his eyes, said, hoping to force the man to move, "Stop spewing nonsense left and right, little eggplant." The man then yelled at Zeph, "Shut up. I'm not some small child that you need to take care of, so stop treating me like one." Patty then yelled, "Sanji, look out." Behind the blonde man stood Pearl, as he lifted both his shields on both sides of Sanji's head as he yelled, "Pearl symbols, ah." The man who was about to attack Sanji then began to scream in pain as two disembodied hands poked his eyes, causing him to flail in pain. Sanji looked only to hear a gunshot being launched. He looked behind him in fear to see that Jin was bent over by disembodied hands, and his gun was pointed to the sky, as he said, "Who is doing this? What in the world just happened?" Sanji quickly then grabbed Zeph, and moved him to the side as he said, echoing Jin's question, "What in the world just happened?" Zeph then looked at him as he said, "I think this is the work of a devil fruit." Sanji was confused. Was this another ability of the rubber boy? But his thoughts were cut out when he saw Pearl run toward him. The man then jumped high in the air as he avoided a hit from Pearl. He then twisted himself in the air, as he brought the heel of his foot onto Pearl. The man then brought up his shield as he protected himself, but he was sent away by the kick as he snarled in frustration, yelling, "Who dared and stop me from attacking him?" Sanji then heard soft laughing, as he saw Robin come out from the door of the restaurant as she said, "Well, you seemed you're taking advantage of wailing on him, while the chef was being held hostage, so I had to interfere for both accounts." She then looked at Sanji, "Sanji, I believe now that you are going to fight him, and protect your home. I believe you can do it." As Sanji looked at Zeph, he then began to remember his story with him. He remembered how he was a small child on a cruise boat dreaming about finding a legendary sea named All Blue. He remembered how the other chefs in that boat used to tease him for his dream. He remembered how one night all hell broke loose when the cook pirates led by Zeph attacked them. He remembered how a storm hit both boats that night. How he tried to fight Zeph only for him to fall into the sea. How Zeph jumped to save him only for his leg to get caught by an anchor. How the man cut off his own leg to go and save him from death. How they both ended up on a stone in the middle of the ocean. How Zeph gave him a small amount of food while he took a large sack. How he was forced to ration his food so it won't run out. How one day he hit his breaking point and attacked Zeph to try and get the food in his huge sack. How he only food gold inside the bag. How he discovered that Zeph gave him all the food they had. How a rescue boat found them. How they opened the restaurant. And finally how Zeph taught him from the scratch up everything that he knows today, from fighting to cooking. He was not going to fail Zeph. Sanji then adjusted his suit as he looked at Robin, and said, "Thank you for protecting him, Robin-san, but now I'll take care of this trash by myself," he said as he looked at Pearl, who was foaming in anger. He then ran at the man, closing the distance as he jumped and delivered a devastating kick to the man's face, causing blood to seep from his forehead, and Sanji said, "Listen here, you oversized pot, leave or be forced to." The man angrily stood up as he said, "Danger, danger." He then once again erupted into flames, and swirls towards Sanji, who simply kicked them away as he said, "It seems you forgot that I'm a chef, so I'll remind once again I'm not afraid of your flames." Pearl then laughed as he said, "You should be. Once I'm done with you, you'll be nothing but a flaming corpse on this boat." The man then rushed towards Sanji as he lifted his flaming shield, saying, "Flame surprise." Sanji ducked under the fist and moved to close the ranger between him and Pearl, as he kicked the shield, making the flaming man back away. Sanji then ran quickly as Pearl tried to attack him once more, but Sanji weaved his blow away as he kicked him straight in the face, causing the armored man to fall to the ground and snuffing out his flames. This caused Krieg's men to whisper in fear of the man as they said, "No way, but did just defeat Pearl? He can't just do that. Pearl is invincible." Don Krieg from the other side of the fight looked at the downed form of Pearl, and he yelled, "Pearl, what the heck do you think you're doing?" The man then screamed louder, "Get the hell up right now, or else I'll consider this treason, and kick you from the crew for being such a useless piece of space." Luffy then frowned as he looked at Krieg for the way he treated his men like they were some tools. He reminded him too much of Kuro, but Krieg was different in a way that his orders were absolute, and there was no talking back or else you committed treason. This was something Luffy didn't like. He then looked and saw that Robin was still holding Jin in place, and he said, "Such a shame, we have to fight him. He seemed like he is a really nice guy if you ask me." He then heard laughter coming from Krieg. He looked at the man, and asked as he tilted his head in confusion, "What's so funny?" The man then smirked as he said, "I'm laughing at your naive nature. How you were tricked by Jin's act. The man is nothing but a murderous beast who has no problem taking down anyone. He lives and breathes murder. If anything, I reel him in." He then looked at the girl holding him, and said to Luffy, "You better hope that girl of yours knows what she's doing, or else she's going to an early grave." The boy then looked back to the fight and then at the older pirate, so he also readied himself to fight Krieg, as he stretched his arm back, and hit the man's armor, who scoffed, taking the blow without a sign of stress on his face, saying, "Weak." The man then opened his arsenal of guns on the boy, saying, "Now meet true power." Back with Sanji, he looked at Pearl, who was slowly standing up, and said, "I thought I kicked your butt so hard that you won't be coming up for seconds. What's wrong with your brain? I'm sure that by now you must know that I'm pretty much stronger than you. Pearl then scoffed as he said, you will never be able to defeat me. I, Pearl, will destroy you. The man then jumped into the air as he said, diving Pearl? The armored man then put his arms forward as he went sailing through the air toward Sanji, surprise. Luckily for Sanji, he jumped away in time and delivered a kick to Pearl's face, who began to whine like a child as he said, look at what you did to my beautiful face. You will pay for this. Pearl then rushed toward the blonde-haired man who did the same, and tried to punch with his shield only for Sanji to then kick his arm away, and kick him in the huge shield that protected his chest, making him back off. Sanji didn't give Pearl time to think as he jumped toward him, delivering a kick to his neck, making the man wheeze and cough. This caused the chefs to begin and cheer for Sanji, telling him to beat the armored idiot and destroy him completely, though Sanji preferred if they didn't talk to him at all. He then looked and saw that Pearl is right in front of him and trying to hit him with his shield, but rolled on the ground avoiding the strike. But this itself caused a moment of distraction as Pearl managed to outsmart him and rush quickly to Sanji before he can readjust himself, and hit him with his shield, causing the Krieg to cheer for him to finish Sanji off. Sanji then ran and hit the armor on Pearl's chest multiple times as blood flew down his face, and he then jumped away before Pearl can hit him. Pearl then said, why bother to kick my shield? You know you won't be able to put a dent on it. Sanji smirked as he said, well, there's a first time for everything I suppose, and it's the best way to kick your butt out of this ship by first destroying that shield you have, so be ready cause it's about to go away from you. Pearl then laughed, don't lie to yourself, you fighting a pointless war. You're tiring yourself out. I only have to wait till your legs give out, and after that, it's game over for you. Sanji didn't reply as he threw the cigarette he had in his mouth, and replaced it with a new one. I'd like to see you try that after I'm done with you. He then cracked his neck, but in all seriousness playtime is over, and I want this to end quickly, so prepare yourself to taste defeat. The blonde ran the distance between him and the armored man and kicked him in the chest armor, but unlike all the previous times, when Pearl was able to shrug off the pain this time he gasped as he felt some pain funnel through. He looked down in horror only to see that his precious armor was dented. He looked at Sanji, who held a smug look on his face as he asked bewildered, how were you able to dent it? This is pure metal. A bug like shouldn't be able to leave a scratch on it. Sanji then took a puff of smoke from his cigarette as he said, years of training and kicking metal walls can do wonders for anyone. He pointed his cigarette at Pearl, asking him, do you give up, or do I have to kick it from you? Reaching his max, Pearl roared in anger as he attacked Sanji, who dodged under him and kicked him in the back of the neck, causing the huge man to fall to the ground. He then stood up and wiped the blood that was falling from his face as he then tried to activate his fire mode, but Sanji beat him to the punch as he said, not happening. The blonde man then kicked him so hard in the chest that the armor had an imprint of his foot on it, causing all the pirates to gape as he was able to dent Pearl's armor. But how? No was able to even touch, let alone dent it in one go. This restaurant is full of monsters, I tell you. Meanwhile, Krieg was shocked that someone actually managed to leave a mark on Pearl's shield. Plus, he was furious since that thing wasn't cheap to make or bring. He wanted to go there and end it as soon as possible, but a voice caught his attention, don't forget that I'm still here. Luffy sighed as he flung a punch toward Krieg, managing to hit him in the face, which made the man snarl in anger, you'll pay for this. The man then returned to firing all the ammunition he had on Luffy, who merely made it ricochet off his body. Back with Sanji, Pearl stood up and yelled, no one hits the iron wall, Pearl, and lives to tell the tale. The man dashed quickly toward the blonde, but by that point, Sanji decided to end the fight. The blonde man met Pearl in the middle of the way as the latter tried to do an armored punch, but Sanji ducked and kicked him in the chest, causing the armor to bend inwards. This was followed by another kick to the chest, making Pearl gasp for breath as Sanji continued his assault on him. Sanji then kicked him in the face to disorient him, managing to launch a counter-strike for his hits. Finally, he gave a well-placed hard kick to the center of the armor, and then it happened. The sound of metal being shattered echoed through both boats. Everyone then looked as they watched Pearl's armor shattered into pieces as the man himself looked like he was about to lose it from shock. Sanji merely stood there as he said, how do you like your do? Do you want dessert with, or do you want to live another day? He finished as he promptly kicked Pearl in the side of the head and made him fall. He looked at the now terrified forms of the Krieg pirates who were trembling in fear of him. You didn't get the Kai as strong as Pearl without having people getting afraid of you. Sanji then walked forward toward Zeph, and put out his hand, as he said in a calm voice, see old man, I told you to stop treating like some child. I know what I'm doing out there. Zeph could only retort with a snort at the achievement of his pupil as he reattached the wooden peg. Everything was going smooth till a gunshot echoed throughout the boat, and someone was dashing. Sanji only had a few moments to look only for Jin to appear right in front of him holding tonfas. But what shocked that the man didn't even try to attack him in the first place. He attacked Pearl, who was still conscious though barely, and tried to hit Sanji with the shields on his arms. Everyone was shocked at the occurrence, especially the Krieg pirates. They just saw their second-in-command attack one of his allies and knock him out for good, but what they couldn't answer was why. They all gulped as they knew that their captain won't like this one bit. As if on cue, Krieg's voice echoed from the other side where he was still stuck in a stalemate with the rubber boy. What's the meaning of this, Jin? Why did you attack Pearl when he was about to finish this runt? And why didn't you finish off the girl when you managed to shot her? And true to Krieg's word, Robin was the ground holding her injured shoulder that Jin managed to shoot. The man cleverly threw the gun from one hand to another when the girl was distracted by Sanji's apparent victory and managed to angle the gun in an angle that he was able to shoot her in the shoulder, causing her to let go of the power holding him. The man looked at his captain saying, "Captain, I only took down Pearl because he was causing too much damage to the boat, and I wanted to personally kill Sanji." He then looked back at Robin and said, "And as for her, I thought it was best to leave her fate for you to decide after you kill her lover." The man looked at his second in command as he hummed a little, "Alright Jin, now go quickly and finish this runt, and don't you dare betray me." The tanned man then nodded his head as he said, "I would never, Captain." Every one of the chefs then recognized Jin as his weapon of choice. He was known as the man demon. The guy was known for his bloodlust when he fought his enemies, always leaving them beaten half to death, if not beaten to death. They looked at Sanji, who seemed worse for wear, and they prayed that the blonde boy manages to pull off a miracle by winning the fight and not getting himself killed in the process. Meanwhile, Sanji was beyond livid. He looked at Robin, who was clutching her shoulder in pain, and he honestly could only see red. If there was one thing that he was actually grateful that the old-timer managed to kick there his head, it was respect toward women and not hurting them under any circumstances. He looked at Jin and yelled, "How could hurt a woman?" Jin merely shrugged, not getting the point, as he explained, "She was in the way of me helping my captain, so I took her down." He went quiet for a moment and added, "Just like I'm going to take you down." The two men then looked at each other. They stared for a moment or two as Jin weighed his tonfa in each hand, while Sanji tapped his feet into the ground, readying himself for another fight. Each of them had something to protect. The tanned man wanted to help his captain reach his goal, while the blonde man wanted to protect the dream of someone he cherished dearly, even if he didn't show it to the outside world. Jin then said, "You know you could end this by giving up. I mean, looking at this realistically, you're at a disadvantage. The previous fight must have worn you out while I'm still fresh." Sanji snorted at the man's words as he replied back, "I can say the same thing about you honestly. You were hungry for days on end. On some level, you're not that much better than me." The two men then quickly ran toward each other, and they began to fight. Jin tried to hit Sanji in the face only for the blonde man to pry the hit away, and he himself tried to land a kick to Jin's stomach, but the man backed away at the last moment. The tanned man then jumped into the air as he attempted to land a double hit on Sanji, but the blonde man countered with a kick that blocked the attack. Both combatants continued to trade blows with each other, but unknown to them, Krieg was smirking. Luffy saw this and couldn't help but ask, "Why are you smiling, yellow trash can?" The man felt his veins pop, but he chose to ignore the insult since the brat would be dead in a few. He looked at him. "You honestly still believe that you idiots stand a chance in victory?" He then pointed toward Jin fighting Sanji, saying, "That man right there will be your end. Jin will kill every single one of you when he's finished with that chef." Luffy then said, "Nah, Sanji's gonna win. I know it. He has too much to lose here, unlike Jin, who has nothing but a failure of a captain." This comment made Krieg angry as he ran toward the rubber boy with his fist raised to punch him, but once he did, the rubber boy smiled before punching him once more in the face, saying, "You don't learn, do you?" The armored grimaced as he thought that this was going to take more than he thought to take the boy down for good. Back with Sanji, the man was blocking and attacking as fast as he can, but there was a problem. Exhaustion was hitting him hard. The constant pressure that the two tonfas were putting on his legs was causing them to weaken, slowly add to that the pain he still had from fighting Pearl, and you get the perfect equation, got defeat, but he wasn't going to back down, or lose. He looked only to see Jin aiming an attack on his head. The man dodged but was shocked when Jin readjusted himself, launching a hit to his side which the man was sure to have caused some muscles to tear, and some of his bones to break. Not wanting to be behind, Sanji then delivered a vicious kick to the side of the head and slammed Jin's head into the ground, making the man groan in pain, as he slowly lifted himself from the strike, and quickly dashed toward Sanji. The man jumped high in the air as he brought down his tonfa toward the blonde, who dodged. This was followed by a quick wave from the other tonfa which Sanji blocked before attempting to land a hit himself, to which Jin blocked. Jin then growled in sadness, "Why must you fight me, Sanji?" He then threw a hit, but Sanji blocked it. The blonde then laughed as he said, "I can ask you the same thing myself. Why are you fighting me, Jin? Is your captain really worth all this?" He then took out a new cigarette and began to smoke it, "'Cause I'm sure he's not." "Shut up. You don't know the Don as I do. He's the greatest man ever." Jin clenched his fist, hating where things have arrived, as he added, "Don't you get it? He's going to be the pirate king. I have to support him all the way." He then shouted at the top of his lungs, "It's my job to make sure that everything happens according to what he wants." Jin then ran towards Sanji, attempting to hit him in the chest, but Sanji blocked it with his knee before delivering a hard hit to his chin, causing the man to fall backward, but he soon regained his footing as he attacked once more. this time with more ferocity, and managed to get a hit on the chest, causing the blonde to wheeze out of pain as the other chefs yelled out in concern for his life. Jin then screamed, "See? You can't win against me, so just give up. I'm trying to save your life here. Why are so stubborn? I just don't want anyone to die." Sanji then retorted, "If you didn't want anyone to die, maybe you should have not come alone, not with that guy with you." The two then continued their dance, his foot met steel. But the problem was that Jin was steadily gaining ground on Sanji. The blonde man was being forced onto the defensive as the tanned man attacked without stopping for a moment. The blonde began to feel the bones in his legs begin to crack slowly as Jin continued with his assault. He took a deep breath, and then kicked him in the gut, making he quickly replied by putting a tonfa behind Sanji's head and smashing him into the ground, causing the already bloodied head to bleed more. The last attack made Sanji feel a bit dizzy, but he quickly regained his senses in time to stop an attack from Jin. The attack was followed by another aimed at his neck, but he jumped out of the way, avoiding it. Sanji then jumped in the air as he tried to do an axe kick at Jin's head, but the man protected himself with his weapon of choice. Jin looked at Sanji and then hit him in the leg with his weapon, causing the man to clutch the attacked area in pain. Not wanting his attack to stop, Jin then went and hit the blonde chef with his weapon in his face, causing blood to gush out of the already tried fighter. Sanji then stood up and took a deep breath to try and stabilize himself. He couldn't lose. There was too much at risk here to lose. He looked at Jin, who was holding a sad look on his face. It was one of sadness and disappointment. He then ran toward him and tried to kick him, only for the man to sigh and block the attack that was a bit sloppy given the beat down that Sanji had with both Jin and Pearl. Moments later, Jin attacked Sanji, hitting him in the ribs with his tonfa, and then striking him in the back with his weapon, making the man fall to the ground as he struggled to get up. Jin approached Sanji, but the man managed to kick him in the stomach as he jumped back up, though he was beaten pretty badly in both fights. Jin quickly attacked him and landed a hit on his leg, but Sanji also managed to land a hit against his other hand, causing him to almost drop his weapon from his hand. Jin then quickly decided to subdue Sanji, who was struggling to stand. The man hit Sanji in the back of the head, before following it with a hit to his chest, and finally, he landed a final blow to his right knee, causing Sanji to finally fall to the ground defeated. The man known as Man Demon stood above the blonde cook. It would only take one hit to defeat him, but as he raised his weapon, he couldn't help but remember the kindness that he was offered back when he was angry. Was he really that ungrateful that he was going to fight and kill that hand that reached out to him in his time of need? Try as he may, but couldn't bring himself to lower the weapon and kill Sanji. He was stuck in a standstill between his loyalty to his captain and his human side, which was thought to be non-existent. He looked at the downed Sanji, but he knew that he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He needed quickly to pick a side because he can't have both that he knew. The man was startled out of his thoughts when Krieg yelled to him, "Go on, Jin, what's the holdup? Kill the blonde runt already, so he can get this show on the road." Jin looked at his captain with confusion etched in his eyebrows. He was truly lost, and he didn't know what was the right choice, but he couldn't kill Sanji. He then reached a decision that may cost him greatly, but he didn't regret it one bit. Jin lifted his tonfa and brought it down on Sanji, who closed his eyes. The blonde man waited for the pain to come, but it didn't. He opened his eyes to see that the weapon was planted on the wooden floor beside him. Krieg then yelled, "Jin, what's the meaning of this? Why didn't you kill him as I told you?" The tanned man looked at his captain, as he asked with a dry throat, hoping for the best, and wishing that things had played out differently. "Captain, let's leave this place. Let's leave this boat, and let them keep it." The pirate captain looked stunned. Did his second in command ask him to leave the boat? Did he just disobey a direct order from him? Doesn't he know that the man would tolerate everything but disobedience, which in his books meant betrayal? His shock then turned into anger, as he yelled at his second in command, "Jin, I'm only going to say this once. Kill that runt, or else face the consequences of your actions." Jin felt tears fill his eyes as he said, "But I can't kill him. He helped when I needed him the most. It just feels so wrong to kill him." The captain looked at his subordinate with a disappointed look as he said, "You disappoint me, Jin. I always saw you as my most loyal follower, but today I discovered otherwise. But Don, I just want." Jin was cut off by Krieg, who yelled, "If you are still loyal to me like you call, kill him, otherwise this is considered uprising against your own captain, and you know how I feel how that." Jin stood there in shock as he gulped, not able to process what to do anymore. Krieg then looked at him as he said, "Men, going on forward. Jin isn't one of us anymore. He betrayed us and therefore is one of our enemies. Anyone who helps him will be treated the same." The Krieg pirates were now in shock as they watched Jin betray their captain. He was known as the most loyal man to the captain who was willing to betray the captain. They knew that Jin was loyal to a fault, so much that he personally took their captain's place when the Marines attacked them, and let them take him away to give a chance for their captain to escape with his life and become the Pirate King. Luffy, on the other hand, was shocked that Krieg just discarded Jin like this, so he yelled, "Hey, you can't treat your crewmate like that." Krieg looked at him and said with a sneer, "You're talking as if they're my equals. This is the pirate world, kid. The men are supposed to give their utmost loyalty to their captain, and if they can't then they're good as dead. Luffy, angered by such a claim, tried to punch Krieg, who grabbed his hand and threw him into the sea. The boy screamed as he stretched his hands, and landed on the Baratie's fin with the others. That was a very close call. He then saw an injured Robin, and went to check up on her. "Are you alright, Robin?" The girl smiled, saying, "Nothing that I can't handle, Luffy." She then stood up as she saw a couple of grunts try to rush to where they were standing. She endured the pain as she crossed her arms, saying, "Trinita Fleur. Strangle." The men were then captured by the arms as they were being strangled and were only dropped when the girl caused them to pass out. By this point, Krieg had reached the end of his bearings, so he yelled, "Enough of this. I tried to give you all a chance to escape with your lives, but you only angered me further and fought me." So, the man then opened one of the circular shields on the side of his armor, which caused his men to begin to panic, and beg him not to do it. "It's time to bring out the heavy weapons." The men began to beg, "Think about what you're doing, Captain. That gas could kill us all even after the effect." "Yeah, Captain, don't do it." Krieg shouted, shutting up everyone as he said, "Every one of you idiots, pull out the gas mask that I gave you when you joined the crew." The men pulled out the masks, and put them on their faces, as Krieg said, "Get ready for the MH17 gas." The chefs then panicked as they dragged themselves inside the restaurant, and closed it shut, while Sanji was still outside with Jin above him. The man pulled out his mask to put it over his face, but Krieg then shouted at him, "Drop the mask, Jin." The man looked at him and gulped, as Krieg continued to explain, "You betrayed me, Jin, so you deserve death to atone for your betrayal." The man then pointed to the mask as he added, "So drop the mask, Jin, you don't get to use it." The man slowly but surely dropped the mask, while Sanji coughed, "What are you doing, you idiot? Pick up the mask, or else you'll die." Sanji then saw Jin's face, which had a blank look, and the man told him, "He's right. I betrayed my captain. I'm supposed to die. Men like me don't deserve to live." He then picked up the mask slowly, "But you, Sanji, you deserve to live." He then put the mask on Sanji's face, who was struggling trying to get it off, so he can put it on Jin's face. Krieg then shook his head as he said, showing kindness, "Jin, truly how the mighty have fallen. If only you have killed, then you might have lived." The Mon said, "Bombs away," and with that, the weapon was launched. Luffy, who was on the side, began to panic as he looked around for something to use to protect him and Robin before the bomb exploded. He didn't have much time. He then saw a couple of pirates with masks on them. The boy stretched his arms and grabbed the masks, causing the men to jump into the sea and dive into the water. He then gave Robin a mask and put one on his face. Moments later, a huge purple gas erupted over the entire area and covered the battle fins. Everyone held their breaths, waiting for the gas to be swept away by the air that was blowing. Finally, a couple of minutes later, the gas was being lifted by the air. Krieg stood there with a smug grin on his face as he removed his gas mask, thinking that he killed all of his enemies with one move. He looked as the gas finally was cleared, only to be shocked by the scene. In front of him, he saw that the Straw Hat Runt and his girl each had a mask on their face, while Jin was standing over the blonde-haired man pushing a mask on his face, while Jin himself also had a mask on his face. Being pushed by a disembodied hand a couple of steps away from him was a man gasping for air. The man growled as his ultimate move failed. Jin then removed the mask from his face, clenching his fists in anger, letting Sanji remove his mask and take a gulp of air that he desperately needed, as he yelled at Robin, "Why did you save me? I betrayed my captain. I don't deserve to live, I should die." The girl shook her head, saying, "Jin, you're a wonderful person, but you had the bad luck to follow the wrong person. You don't need to die for him. You have to live to do what you want with your life." The restaurant doors were then opened as Zeph came out of it and said, "Your plans are failing, leave now." Krieg then laughed as he said, "The gas bomb might have not worked, but I'm still Don Krieg, the strongest man alive, and I'll not fall down so easily." Luffy then smiled, saying, "Finally, it's my turn," and without distractions. He then saw the sail that connected both boats and ran on it toward Krieg, who simply pulled out a gadget from his shield as he opened fire. Luffy then said, "I'm immune to bullets, ah." The boy looked at his arm, and he saw that he was impaled by a bunch of spears through his entire body. So Krieg then laughed, "You said you wanted to become the Pirate King. Don't you see that I'm the strongest here? I'm known as the strongest pirate in the East Blue. Do you know why that is?" Luffy scratched his head as he answered, "Krieg, because you have the biggest crew." The man then fell forward, shocked by the boy's answer. "No, you idiot. That's because I have the strongest weapons, and the most powerful armor ever to be made." He then pointed to his armor as he said, "This is power, so tell me, brat, who is the strongest, and who's going to become the Pirate King?" The boy tilted his head to the side as he said with confidence, "Me." Everyone then seat dropped at him, as he clearly didn't understand where Krieg was going with his question. The man then said, "Clearly, you don't understand what you're standing against." He then prepared another of his shields, opening it to a similar to the gas bomb shield. So Luffy then smiled as he decided to kick it away. "How about I give you a taste?" The bomb was then launched, and Luffy kicked it, but it exploded into metal stars that sliced his shoulder and leg, adding more injuries to the areas where the spears were still stuck. The man then said, "You saw my strength, boy, so tell me, how is the strongest now?" Luffy then chuckled as he began to remove the spears from his body. He first removed the one from his shoulder as he said, "Your strength is," and then the one in his abdomen, "in your weapons," then the one in his leg, "but take that away," followed by removing the one in his thigh, "and you're nothing but a weakling." He stood up and declared, "So I'm now even more sure that I'm stronger." Don Krieg then gritted his teeth in annoyance, as he said, "I'm going to kill you, brat." The man then opened fire from his shield, sending more spikes toward Luffy, who jumped away, and stretched his leg backward as he launched it at Krieg, saying, "Gum gum whip." The extended leg then hit the side of the armor and threw Krieg to the side, making him growl in frustration that a lowly pirate who had no name managed to get some hits on him from the beginning. He then stood up, cracking his neck, as he looked at Luffy and said, "I'm done with your games. You're going to die, and that's final." Back on the boat with Sanji, he held Jin back from interfering with Luffy's fight as he said, "Clam down, Jin. You're already injured as it is. Don't worsen your wounds." "But I have to stop him from fighting the Don, or he'll die." He then heard laughter from beside him, and he looked at Robin, who said, "I wouldn't be worried so much about Luffy. He's strong and able to take of himself when the time arises." She then looked in her lover's direction, "Don't worry about him. Just watch him fight." Zeph then walked to both of them and said, "Sanji, look at that boy right now." The blonde man looked at his mentor, wondering at what he was aiming. Although that man is holding all the dangerous weapons and have in every pocket of his some sort of trick, that boy is the real danger here. This confused both Sanji and Jin, but Zeph then finished, "So I want you to watch him fight till the very end." Luffy then ran to Krieg as he ready to punch, but the man pulled out some sort of spiked shield as he yelled at the boy, "Try to bypass this." Luffy then punched him so hard, impaling his hand during the process, but the man felt it from behind the shield. He then was launched away with blood running down his face. Luffy chuckled to himself as he said, "I promise you that I won't die tonight." Battle on the high seas. Luffy stood over the downed of Don Krieg, who was right on the remains of his ship, face down with blood dripping from his mouth, while people were gaping at the scene that the invincible pirate was actually taken down. Jin looked with wide eyes as he said, "Impossible." The man knew that Krieg was close to godhood and can't be touched, let alone be knocked to the ground. The scene to him was something out of fantasy. He then added with bewilderment, "Did he just punch the Don?" Krieg's men began to panic that their boss was just punched and taken down by a kid who was till now a no-name pirate. One of them raised his sword to jump and help him, only for arms to appear on his back and twist him like a pretzel as Robin said, "Anyone who doesn't want to share a fate similar to this, please don't do anything stupid." The men gulped, knowing that this woman meant business and that she wasn't kidding around. They looked back at the scene, and their hearts were beginning to fill with hope again as their leader began raising himself slowly. This caused all of his men to cheer up him. Don Krieg was now furious. Scratch that, he was now beyond furious. That little punk. Not only did he manage to punch him for the third time this day, but he also was able to bypass one of his strongest defenses and send him to the ground. This was something that he can allow to pass lightly. The boy needed to pass on this with his life. The giant man then said, "Hey brat, I heard that you devil fruit users usually sink in the sea, right?" This caused Luffy to tilt his head to the side as he couldn't understand what was the man going for, but he readied himself in case he tried anything. The man, now fully up, then added, "So, tell me one thing, brat, if this isn't your grave," he said as he stood before Luffy before he slammed a giant shield into the boy as he yelled, "Then whose grave is this exactly?" The hit caused the boy to be sent flying away, as Krieg smiled at Luffy saying, "It seems that it's definitely yours, brat." Krieg didn't get to keep this smile for long, as Luffy stretched his foot and slammed it into Krieg's face, smashing the man's head into the wood as Luffy said, "Don't worry, it's your grave." Back with Sanji and the others, they all watched with amazement as Luffy was taking control of the battle's course. Sanji said, "I honestly thought that he was way over his head. I never thought he would be able to fight him on an equal level." He then heard a scoff and looked only to see Zeph staring at the fight with the other cooks. Zeph then smiled saying, "It will take a lot of work before you can understand what's happening here, little eggplant." The one-legged man then added, "As I told you before, even though Krieg has all the weapons, it's the boy who's the real danger here. He fights with his spirit that holds a lot of conviction for his dream." Jin, who was sitting beside Sanji, looked at Luffy and watched him smile confidently with his victory as if he can see it coming from a mile away. Meanwhile, in the water, Krieg's men continued to panic as they watched their captain, the fourth, get punched in the face. It was shocking. This was the world's strongest man, and yet some low-class pirate was able to harm him so badly. Patty looked at Luffy with a smirk as he said, "That kid is sure something. He's throwing that guy around like a rag doll." He looked at the battle scene and added, "Though, I hope he beat him quickly though." One of them then wiped his eyes as he looked at Luffy just to make sure that what he was seeing was real, only to beg greeted by the same sight. The man then yelled in fear, "This isn't supposed to happen." He began to shake off his crewmates saying, "This brat should have been killed way before he even managed to hit the Don. Just what kind of cheap tricks is he pulling to help him in the fight? Another then looked at Luffy with fear as he asked a question running through everyone's mind. Just who is this guy? Robin on the other hand was watching from the dock of the Baratie as she smiled, remembering all the training Luffy did as she answered the question. This is Monkey D. Luffy, the man who will become the Pirate King. Many of Krieg's men then began to complain as they couldn't believe the sight in front of them, or what Robin was telling them, as this made them even more nervous, and didn't help them relax one bit. To them, the idea of someone becoming the Pirate King that wasn't the Don was blasphemy. One of the men then said, I can't believe, but I think that he's strong enough to keep up with our Don. But let's hope that he isn't strong enough to beat him. Back with Krieg, the man slowly rose, as he grabbed two shields, hearing one of his men saying, if this carries on, Don's legendary reputation will be destroyed. He was cut off by the man himself, slamming his shields on a stick as he yelled at the top of his lungs, shut up, you worthless worms. The man then turned to Luffy as he hefted a very huge spear-like weapon, before slamming it into the wood of the boat as an explosion happened to send the rubber boy flying away. As one of his men exclaimed happily, he brought it out. The guy person then grinned evilly, his ultimate weapon. The great spear. No way is that brat going to come back from this. Jin, seeing this, gripped his head as he said in silent worry for Luffy, no, anything but this. He then looked at the ground as he tried to control his breath, and hoped his friend doesn't get hurt too badly or die from this. Sanji saw Jin's state of panic and then shook him as he asked, calm down Jin, what got you shook up to this extent? The blonde-haired man asked, intrigued to the reason why the man known as the Man-Demon was panicking, as if he was reliving his worst nightmare. He looked at Luffy, and saw that the boy was actually doing well against Krieg. So why was Jin panicking now? It just didn't make any sense. Jin looked at him and said, you don't get it. He then pointed at Krieg's weapon saying, this is Krieg's ultimate weapon. He doesn't bring it out unless he wants to make sure that something is thoroughly destroyed. He grabbed the man by the shoulders as he yelled frantically, did you understand now why I'm panicking? They were both shook from their conservation by Robin, who said, don't worry. He's been through worse. Something little like that won't be able to put a stop to Luffy's momentum. It would take more than that to be able to actually defeat, so just simply watch. Both men looked back at the fight as Luffy was now hanging from a wooden beam. Back with Luffy, he took a breath of relief as he watched the water under him shivering as he managed to grab this wooden beam at the last possible moment. He simply asked himself, what happened right now? Did this spear actually explode? He then saw Krieg strolling toward him as he had a smirk on his face. The man then said, well brat, congrats. You forced me to use my strongest weapon here. He then adjusted his grip on the weapon's handle as he carried on with his explanation. This isn't like of those puny spears that you managed to break or remove with your hands. He lifted it high in the air as he yelled, bringing it down, touch it, and it blows you to smithereens. The moment the spear hit the wood, it caused a huge explosion as it launched Luffy away from the wooden beam, causing the boy to scramble in the air before he saw a small wooden platform, and sent his arms toward it, and grabbed it, helping him to find a place to stand on. Krieg's last weapon caused everyone to gasp at its strength, as one of the chefs who was inside the restaurant asked, what the hell is up with this spear? How can it do so much damage? On the other hand, Krieg's man was cheering their captain on as one of them yelled, go get Don. Show this pirate what happens when he messes with the Krieg pirates. This caused the large man to yell at his subordinate, shut up, I don't need you to cheer me on. If you want to be useful, go and get the restaurant, you miserable bugs. Luffy, he said, what is it with the spear? He scratched his head a little as he said to himself, I think I get it now. It explodes everything it touches. The rubber man then slammed a fist into his palm saying, then all I need to do is that I don't allow the spear to hit me. Krieg then yelled at him, do you see it now, brat? I am strength itself, and this is going to be your grave. He lifted his spear as he said, this is going the last day you see the sunlight in it. Luffy gritted his teeth as he knew that he was literally fighting on the water right now, and what frustrated him so much is that the weapon he was using was limiting the area he can use. Damn it, this is so annoying. I can't keep fighting him like this, jumping from one little piece of wreckage to the other. I need to find a way to destroy that weapon. He looked only to see Krieg in his face as the man threw his weapon forward toward Luffy, who managed to dodge it, albeit it was an extremely close call. The man then began to twirl his spear as he swung it toward Luffy, who jumped backward to avoid the hit. Luffy looked behind him only to notice that the ocean was right behind. The boy gulped, but Krieg then rushed trying to attack the boy with his weapon, only for the boy to jump into the air above him. This made Luffy panic as now there was only water under him. At the same time, Krieg swung at him to hit him in the air, causing the boy to get an idea as he sent out his hand. Krieg then looked around in confusion, as he saw that the boy now disappeared. Did the boy sink in the water? No, that wasn't possible. He didn't hear a splash of water around him. He then felt some extra weight on his spear. He looked toward it as he heard a voice say, wow, so close. Krieg's face then darkened as he lifted his blade in the air, and then brought it down to the wooden wreckage. He tried to cause an explosion that would kill the boy, but the boy managed to quickly jump away from the strike. This was all that Krieg needed as he adjusted himself looking at the boy who was still in the air. The man lifted his spear and thrust it forward to the boy who couldn't maneuver himself out of the way. The boy then slammed both his fists on the tip of the spear, but he was caught in a huge explosion which caused a huge cloud of smoke, as the boy was now smoked as he fell backward on his back. One of Krieg's men said, "This is truly a sight of our captain's strength. I mean, look at him. He's lifting the shields that are on his shoulders, each of them weighs 1 ton each." Another then added, "Seems this boy is going to meet his end faster than we thought. It appears we gave him more credit than we should." Another one carried on saying, "This is the strongest piece of evidence that we're going to be the greatest crew of pirates in history." With Sanji, the man looked at the charred body of Luffy with shock as he bit his lip saying, "That idiot, he should be careful. Anymore, and he will die from bleeding." This caused Jin to nod his head knowing how Krieg was tricky to fight. Robin beside them looked with worry in her eyes. She believed in him, but couldn't help but worry about her boyfriend. But what she couldn't get is why he slammed both his hands on the tip of the spear. He looked at it as if she understood the purpose, and said to nobody, "It's a genius idea, but I hope that you don't rough up yourself too much, Luffy." Krieg then walked toward the rubber boy as he said with malice in his voice, "I'm not done with you yet." Luffy then stood up as he breathed heavily. He looked at the weapon as he readied himself to continue the fight. Krieg then lifted his spear, as he yelled, releasing some of the anger that he was continuing, "After all the inconvenience that you put me through, don't think that I'm going to let you go off this easily." He then brought down his spear yelling, "After I'm done, there will be no remains for the people to find." Luffy then punched the tip of the spear as an explosion enveloped him, sending him flying to the other side of the wreckage. He fell down, blood running down his face and hand. Krieg then grinned as he talked to Luffy, "Boy, do you see it, now? Can you see that I'm the strongest between just here?" Luffy then jumped upward as he adjusted himself with a huge smile on his face, looking toward Krieg as he said, "No, I'm still the strongest here, and that little weapon of yours won't bother us anymore, so why don't you throw it away?" "What do you mean?" The man asked, only for his question to be answered a second later as he heard a breaking sound. He looked only to see that his spear's tip was now broken. This caused him to yell in shock, "What the heck did you do to my spear?" Luffy smiled victoriously as he said, "Nothing much, but I punched it many till it broke." He then looked at Krieg and then at his surrounding before saying, "Now, prepare to see the end of this fight, because right now I have enough space to move freely, and I will finish this as quickly as possible." The statement confused Krieg as he asked, "What?" The heavily armored man then looked around and saw that now both of them were standing on a large piece of wreckage that allowed the boy to gain some of his freedom in movement, but he then said, "Do you think that just because you have more space now that you're going to win?" The man shook his head saying, "You're seriously delusional." Luffy looked at Krieg with confidence saying, "Now without the tip, all you have right there is nothing but a bomb tied to a stick, so it is easy to beat you up real good." Luffy then cracked his knuckles as he readied himself to continue the fight. "This also means that I managed to reduce the power of your weapon by half." Krieg sneered at him looking at his weapon. "Is that truly what you think? That just because you managed to destroy my prized weapon that you're now somehow able to defeat me?" The man shook his head pointing at the partially destroyed weapon saying, "Even right now, this bomb on the stick is more than capable of sending you flying, so I say that my chances of beating are still pretty high. Tell me, what do you think?" On the side, one of Krieg's men looked shocked as he just saw his boss's ultimate weapon get destroyed. "No way. Did he just destroy the Don's most powerful weapon? What is this kid made of? I really think we should retreat." He looked at Luffy and added, "Also just look at yourself. You're bleeding from everywhere. Add to that 2 injuries from the spear of my weapon, so I'm still pretty sure my victory is guaranteed." "Shut up, if the Don hears you, he'll kill us all." Another one shouted, causing the man to shut up in fear of being killed. On the other hand, the chefs of the Baratie were celebrating this as a sign of victory. Sanji was the only one looking at the main issue at hand, which was that Luffy at this point was heavily injured beyond belief as he murmured to himself, "As much as I hate to say it, that bastard is right. The rubber brain is heavily injured. I highly doubt if he can keep fighting, and if he did he will be at a heavy disadvantage." Zeph, who heard Sanji murmuring, came near him and said, "You know, Sanji, that even with all those weapons of his he won't able to win the fight." The boy looked at him with confusion as he carried on the battlefield between pirates. The one who has hesitation in his heart is usually the person that dies since he's afraid of death. He looked at Luffy and said, "But that boy, he has no hesitation in his heart." Sanji then asked, "What? I don't know why, but I suspect it is mostly from his conviction to follow his dreams to the fullest, or from his preparedness to survive whatever is thrown at him. But know this, Sanji, that this boy will come out victorious." Sanji looked back at the fight with shock that the old man actually acknowledged someone as he thought about the geezer's words, what meanings they carry behind them, and what that means to him in his own dreams. Krieg tried to rush Luffy by running toward him yelling, "Say your prayers, brat, because it's over for you," the bomb stick before bringing it down toward Luffy. "Your death was sent in stone the moment you brat thought that you can play around with me." Luffy merely stuck out his tongue at Krieg saying, "Like that's happening." He then jumped back at the bomb stick and hit the wreckage, causing an explosion to occur. Luffy, trying to avoid being at the center of the explosion, stretched his arms toward a beam of wood hanging onto it. Krieg looked at Luffy, yelling at the boy, "Stay still, you damn monkey." He then ran toward the beam that the rubber boy was hanging on before hitting it with his weapon, causing its base to explode as Luffy yelled in joy at being launched into the air, laughing all the way. Luffy then grabbed the wooden beam and sent it flying toward Krieg as he said, "Eat this, trash can." The older pirate replied by providing a new weapon in his arsenal, which was a flamethrower that managed to burn the wooden beam before it even crossed the distance between Luffy and Krieg. Everyone was shocked that Krieg still had so many tricks up his sleeve. Sanji choked on his spit looking at the weapon as he wondered how Luffy will win now. Luffy, on the other hand, took a deep breath and took both his fists back, yelling, "Gum gum Gatling gun." And with that, Luffy began sending one punch after the other toward who brought up his bomb stick to defend himself in addition to the armor. The man yelled, "Give up, brat. My armor is the reason that I'm invincible. You won't be even able to put a scratch on it, let alone destroy it. So stop wasting and die already." Luffy then ran quickly toward Krieg as he pulled his hand back, yelling, "Gum gum bullet." The hand then flew quickly toward Krieg as it hit the armor in the center, causing Krieg to gasp a little as the pressure from the hit caused some of Luffy's blood to splatter against the armor. Krieg then punched Luffy away as he yelled, "You insolent brat. All of your attempts are futile. You can't defeat me, and my armor is invincible. And all of your weak attempts at punching it will fail." Luffy then stood up and said, "Not if I have something to say about it. That armor will be destroyed. Mark my words." Krieg laughed at him, "You're delusional, and even after you destroyed my greatest weapon right now, you are barely able to stand." Luffy smirked, "We'll see who will be the last man standing, cause believe me, it won't be you in any way." Back on the sides, the Krieg pirates were still debating who will win as one of their aid. "The Don is definitely winning. I say we go attack the chef's boat so he won't kill us for finding that the boat is still not under our control." Another one said, "Are you sure?" He looked at the battlefield and said, "I mean, the rubber boy seems to handle himself really well. I don't know if the Don can defeat him, or not." Everyone looked at him as he continued, "I mean, look at them, they seem evenly equaled. Plus, I don't know what we will do if the Don is defeated." The others began to shiver imagining such a case because they knew that if that happened it will basically spell their doom. The fall of the Don will mean that they will be lost to the waves of the East Blue since they had no home to receive them or protect them. They shook their head as they convinced themselves, saying, "No way that the Don will lose to a brat. I mean, come one, he fought tougher foes. Remember Arlong, we're the only crew in the East Blue that not managed to hold its own against it, but also managed to put them away from us." Meanwhile, Robin was assessing the damage that Luffy was dealing to himself as she looked at him, saying, "Luffy, be careful." She began to notice that his wounds were becoming greater, and were bleeding to a higher level. She wished she could be there with him, but she knew that Luffy wouldn't want her to interfere with his fights. Jin looked at the fight, but he felt something. It was freedom. He looked at the boy that was facing his former captain and felt that his freedom from Don Krieg was coming, but he only had to wait a little more. Back with Krieg, the older pirate now stood on top of a broken mast from his destroyed ship as he looked down on Luffy, saying, "Can't you see that my greater weaponry and armory far exceeds your devil fruit power?" He lifted his weapon as he said, "Can't you see that I can literally sink you any moment now without you being able to do anything to stop me, hammer?" The man then began to throw tiny objects toward Luffy, to which many recognized on a closer look that they are bombs. Everyone began to panic as they realized that Krieg's plan was now to blow the wreckage up so that Luffy will have to wear to fight and will sink. The boy looked at Krieg and saw the bombs that were falling toward him, before jumping into the air. However, Krieg had another thing in mind as he set up a trap when the boy ran up the mast. The man lifted his bomb stick and hit the boy with it, causing a huge explosion to occur as the boy emerged from the wreckage, burned greatly. Krieg laughed at him but stopped when noticed the boy still stretching his hands. "Gum gum bazooka!" Luffy yelled as both of his fists hit the armor of Krieg, sending him flying in the air and causing him to drop the bomb stick. Krieg then continued to laugh as he mocked Luffy's attack. "Once again, your attack wasn't able to do much on me, and I'm still standing my ground." He looked at his armor only to see it cracked, "But I must admire your strength to be able to crack my armor." But now, he looked at Luffy, who was badly injured, and his spear in addition to the mini bombs he threw. "You can die happily." Sanji yelled out Luffy's name as a huge explosion destroyed the remnants of the platform Luffy was using, before remembering Zeph's words about death and hesitation, wondering if the boy will come back even after this. His question was answered quickly as Luffy burst from the smoke, jumping toward Krieg as he yelled at the top of his lung, "Gum gum." The boy then stretched both his hands backward till they reached where Sanji was standing, and led them go forward to a shocked Krieg. Bazooka. The hit made contact with Krieg, but everyone was shocked when the man's armor was shattered into pieces as the man himself was spitting out blood from his mouth due to the strength of the attack against him. Krieg's men were now officially frightened as they said, "No way, he destroyed Don's armor." And with that, panic began to set among the pirate captain's men while the chefs were celebrating their supposed victory. But the celebration was cut short when Krieg yelled, "Don't feel happy yet, because I'm still in the fight." The man then activated a net-like trap from his hand that wrapped all around Luffy, as Krieg yelled, "Now brat, tell me how we're going to get out of this one." The man then threw him toward the sea saying, "I told you this was going to be your grave, didn't I?" He then laughed loudly as he said, "It's who laughs at the end of the fight who is considered the victor." Krieg then looked at his men and yelled, "Everyone, shoot at him, so he won't be able to come back from this." Krieg's men quickly brought out crossbows and pointed them toward Luffy, but that didn't get far since Sanji and Robin made short work of some of them, causing the rest to hesitate and lower their weapons. Luffy then said, "I'm bored. Let's finish this." The boy then sent his legs and grabbed Don Krieg's head with them. He then began to twirl his legs toward the Baratie's side. The man yelled from his restraints as he looked at the approaching figure of the floating ship. The man then was being twirled toward the restaurant as the rubber boy yelled, "Gum gum." Krieg's head was then slammed into the side of the Baratie sledgehammer. And with that, the rubber boy let go of the man who fell down, but Luffy also passed due to the extreme injuries he suffered. The boy was falling quickly into the sea if it weren't for phantom hands which caught the net and began to drag it back to the ship. Once Luffy was back on the fins of the restaurant, Robin Smil, "Sleep well now. You earned it this time." They then heard noises, as Krieg in a heavily injured state stood up, and yelled, "I will not be defeated by a brat of all things. I will defeated him." The man didn't get to finish his sentence as Jin leveled his tonfa into his gut, causing the man to finally pass out. Jin then said to his former captain, "Rest well, Captain, I think it's time we end this farce." Jin then sat down as he ran his hand through his hair and said, "I don't know what to do now. I mean, everything I knew in my life was being a pirate. Should I return to being one?" Luckily for him, Zeph heard his question and said, "Why don't you work for me? We can always use the extra hand around." Jin looked at him as if the old man had just grown another head. He wanted to take the offer, but why did the man offer it to him in the first place? Jin said, "I really appreciate it, but why did you offer it to me when I attacked not so long ago?" The man laughed at him and said, "I don't care about that. Do you think the others in there are gentlemen? No, most of them are pirates. I kicked their butts when they tried to ransack my restaurant. If anything, you folks are the closet to that goal." He then extended his hand and said, "So how about it?" Jin took his hand and said, "Thank you for the opportunity." The man waved at him before saying, "Don't think of it too much. We need waiters for our restaurant that can fight, and you people fit the bill, so go tell your crewmates that they are welcome to join us if they want that is." Jin quickly carried Krieg as he went to tell the others the good news, while also tying the knocked out man, and sending him away so he won't cause any more trouble to the residents of the ship. It's been a day since the defeat of Krieg. The man was shipped away in a small boat to God knows where. His former crew were now officially part of the Baratie and apologized for their actions after some convincing on Jin's end. Robin had her bullet wound treated. Zoro woke up to see that his wound was patched up at best, and finally, Luffy woke up screaming, "My hat." He looked around and saw Robin, who was smiling while holding his hat. She then handed it to him while saying, "I had a feeling that this might keep happening while you're fighting, so I put an addition to it." The boy looked at his hat and saw that it now had a string attached to it. The boy smiled and said, "Thanks, Robin." The girl giggled as she said, "My pleasure, as long as you're happy then I'm happy." He then looked at her shoulder and asked, "Does it hurt? Do you want me to rub it for you?" The girl smiled at how considerate the boy was, and said, "I don't think so, Luffy." She then smirked as she said, "What about you, mister? You seem that you've been through hell and back." She then grabbed his head and said, "Good work, Luffy. You really showed them who's boss." The boy blushed a little at the compliment and stretched his arm to scratch his cheek saying, "I really didn't do anything. I just wanted to help protect the boat, and maybe convince Sanji to join the crew. I don't deserve that much credit. I'm not some hero after all." Robin replied to him, "And because that I love you, Luffy. It's because you always help others without wanting anything in return. And for your performance, you deserve a reward." The boy was confused, but then the girl put her lips on his, and he allowed himself to melt in the kiss. A cough drew both of their attention as Zoro, obviously annoyed, yelled, "Didn't we agree to keep the PDA to a minimum when there are people around? I mean, I don't mind you both acting like a married couple on the boat, but this is taking it too much." He then hiked his finger toward the outside, and they saw Sanji clutching the rails of the restaurant crying about something being unfair. "I don't think this pervert can take any more." This caused the blonde cook to immediately run to Zoro as he said angrily, "What did you say, you shitty Marimo?" Zoro then replied, "You heard me, you second-class chef. You've been perving on my captain's girlfriend ever since we landed on this boat. The truth hurt, I know, but that's what you are and ever will be." Sanji readied himself to kick Zoro's head, but then Robin interjected saying, Now, boys, both of you are injured and shouldn't fight with each other." This was met by a grunt by Zoro, and Sanji began to flirt with Robin much to the rubber boy's ire. Luffy then remembered something as he said, "Guys, what happened to the trash can's men?" This caused Robin to laugh since Luffy till now didn't learn Krieg's name, but Sanji answered him, "They joined the Baratie. They're now the new waiters." This caused both Luffy and Zoro to go wide-eyed as they spoke in unison. "Really? You guys allowed them to work for you after they attacked you. This was met by a shrug from Sanji, who said, I don't care honestly. I mean, most of the chefs are previous pirates themselves at one point, so why not the waiters? At this point, Zoro and Luffy couldn't argue with him since he was right. Zoro then said, just don't expect us to sum and save your butt when they turn on you like yesterday. We have better things to do in our lives than saving perverted cooks. Sanji's eyebrow then twitched in annoyance. He was about to retort, but Luffy then said, but Zoro, I defeated Krieg, so that means that he's coming with us. That was the deal with the old man. Sanji sighed, wondering why was it so hard to get information that the rubber boys had, as he said, listen here, you rubber idiot. I'm not some piece of treasure to get bargained off. I won't leave this restaurant, and that's final. Luffy frowned at Sanji as he said, come on, being a pirate is fun. You get to go on adventures, meet new people, have friends. He then added something to sweeten the deal using his mind, and I'm sure you'll be able to meet some girls that might like you. At the mention of girls, Sanji's eyes turned into hearts, but he quickly came out of that state as he said while sighing, I'm sorry, but I can't become a pirate. He then looked at the ocean as he said, I won't leave this place till the old man acknowledges me as a chef. Luffy looked at him with a sad look, but nodded, okay, I won't bother you anymore. However, Sanji felt that the boy was lying as his hand was strangling him as the cook said, are you sure? Cause your hand doesn't seem to want to let me go free. However, once Luffy let Sanji go, Robin then spoke up, Sanji, I'm pretty sure that Zeph already acknowledges your skills. Why do you think he put you as a head chef here? It would seem highly illogical if he was to put someone he doesn't trust in such a high position. Sanji looked at her, and honestly, he couldn't refute her points. Add to that what she told him a couple of days back about the old wanting him to live his life to the fullest, and he was feeling his resolve was crumbling, but he steeled himself as he looked away, causing Robin to sigh. Sanji then said, but I do plan to go to the Grand Line one day. Luffy then smiled as he said, well, let's go now. Sanji shook his head as he said, not now, but when I go out there, I want to reach my dream. The man then took a deep breath of smoke as he said, I want to find the all blue. Sanji half expected the rubber boy not to know anything about it, but was shocked when the boy asked his lover, all blue? Robin, isn't it that miracle sea that all the fishes in all the blues are found? This caused Sanji to choke on his cigarette, not expecting anyone to hear about his dream. Robin nodded at her boyfriend while Sanji said, you know about it. The boy looked at him as if he were an idiot and asked, shouldn't I? Sanji then shook his head saying, no, I just didn't expect someone like you to know about the all blue. It's just weird. I mean, of all people, I didn't expect you to know anything about it. This caused Luffy to hunch over as he wondered why everyone thinks that he was stupid. He really studied hard through all those years. Robin stood beside him as Shiji then said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. The rubber boy shook his head as he said, no problem. The two then began to talk about Sanji's dream. In the meantime, Zeph watched Sanji and Luffy talk with each other, smiling the entire time. After a while, it was now time for lunch, so everyone was preparing tables. Krieg's former crew was busy attending to their new job as they kept going inside the kitchen and bringing plates full of food that the cooks made. The entire staff of the Baratie then began to eat, but the doors then opened revealing Luffy, Robin, and Sanji. Sanji looked around as he said, hey guys, where are our seats? Patty then replied, sorry, but with the influx of the new members, you three had to sit on the ground. Now, Sanji didn't mind sitting on the ground, but there is no world where he would allow a woman to sit on the ground. The man then quickly kicked a chair from under one of the chefs before giving it to Robin, who thanked him. The cook then sat with Luffy on the ground as he was handed a plate of soup. The two then began to eat it, but suddenly Patty stood up saying, who made this soup? Sanji puffed his chest in happiness as he said, I did. I think I can say that this is one of the most important dishes I made. He was cut from his thoughts when Patty slammed the soup into the floor saying, this is one of the most disgusting abominations that I ever tasted. Other chefs then began to do the same while Luffy, Robin, Krieg's former crew, and Zeph continued to eat silently, but finally, Zeph stood up saying, you shouldn't waste food. Even if it was a horrible sludge that should be considered a crime against humanity like this, you should eat it till the final spoon. The man finished speaking as he finished the dish. Sanji tried to get some answers out of the old man on how his soup was different from Zeph's, but Zeph knocked him down to the ground, shocking everyone. The thing that shocked the chefs was that Zeph used his hand instead of his feet, saying that Sanji was 100 years too young to compare to him. The blonde boy then marched out of the room. Luffy then said, I don't know what you guys are talking about. This soup is the best, he said with Robin nodding. The chefs then admitted that this was Polly by them to help Sanji go out of the boat to achieve his dreams. They said that they only resorted to this, since the blonde man was too stubborn for his own good, and that they tried different ways, but he wouldn't budge. Unknown to them, Sanji heard everything they said, and smiled knowing how much they cared about him. Zeph then looked at Luffy, boy, you kept your end of the deal, so I'm keeping mine. Sanji is all yours to take. He looked at Luffy, who simply said, I don't want to. This shocked everyone. The boy then quickly explained, don't get me wrong. He's a great chef, but he doesn't want to come, so I won't force him to. Zeph understood where the boy was coming from, but he knew it was going to be hard to convince the blonde to go with them if he didn't want to. Back outside with Sanji, he was thinking about what he heard. He then thought about what Robin told him. After what seemed to him hours of thinking, he came to a decision. He then walked inside the dining room and said, "Listen up, you knuckleheads." Everyone looked at him expecting him to pick a fight, but were flabbergasted when he said, "Thank you for what you did to me." Everyone was confused till Sanji said, "You can drop the act. I heard everything while I was outside." The chefs then sighed, but were completely shocked when Sanji looked at Luffy and said, "As for you, I was thinking about your offer, and I think I want to join." Everyone went wide-eyed. "We both have crazy dreams, and we must stick together." "Yes, now then let's go and help Nami," Luffy declared happily. Onward to Nami. It was the morning of the day after Sanji accepted Luffy's invitation to the crew, and everyone was packing their stuff to go to see Nami and help her on her island. Both Zoro and Robin could see the fight coming to a meal away, not that it mattered for them. They were pirates, and they had to fight to survive. They were also planning to brief Sanji on what was happening with Nami, so he was in the clear. In the pantry of the Baratie, Luffy was staying beside a chef who was packing supplies for the small ship that they gave them, but Luffy told him, "Put more meat. We really need more meat." The man raised an eyebrow as he said, "Are you sure? We almost gave you the entire meat supply of the Baratie." The boy nodded his head as the chef shrugged and continued to pack more meat into the bag. Luffy then heard someone calling out for him. He walked and saw Zeph standing in the doorway. The man looked at him with a curious look before he slammed his wooden foot on his head, saying, "Stop taking our meat. You'll make us go bankrupt at this rate." The boy rubbed his head as he said, "It can't be helped. We need meat to eat so we can stay strong. Isn't that what you chefs do?" The old man slapped his forehead, not knowing how to work with the boy's understanding of how the world works in the first place, so he simply shook his head before he began to laugh out loud, and said, wiping a tear away, "Listen here, kid. I have something that may help you on your journey." The boy raised an eyebrow, intrigued by what might the head chef of this restaurant have for him to use. The man then took out a small book from his chef's coat as he explained, "You see, this is my pirate's journal. In this book, my men and I noted everything that happened with us on the Grand Line, be it from weird weather phenomena, island inhabitants, or enormous creatures. I decided to give it to." The man was cut off when Luffy said quickly, "No need for it. I really appreciate the offer, but I don't need it." This shocked the old man, as he was sure that the boy will jump on the offer the moment the journal was shown to him, but here he was refusing it. It intrigued the man, so he asked the boy, "I accept your decision, but why did you refuse it? It may have helped you and your crew in the long term." The boy's answer was simple, but it expressed a lot about his character. "I refused it because I wanted to write my own adventures. If I took this book, it would have helped me, but it would be like living your journey. I want to live on my own. I want to have my own adventures before I become the Pirate King." The man looked at him and smiled as he said, "All right, you brat, but don't you come back to my doorstep begging me for the book. This was a one-time offer, and after that, the book is off limits no matter what you do to get it." The boy smiled at him and began to walk outside. As he left, Zeph, who said, "His journey will be quite something, that I'm sure of." Outside, Sanji was putting the last of the supplies inside the ship as he was complaining, "What the heck do we need all this meat for? I'm sure the glutton of a captain we have will try and eat it all, but I'll kick him to death before he can do that." He then looked at Zoro, who was leaning against the door of the Baratie, and yelled, "Hi, Moss Head, come and give me a hand here." The swordsman's vein popped as he said, "Do it yourself, you damn second-rate cook." This didn't go unnoticed, who jumped to Zoro and tried to kick, only for the swordsman to put his foot in the way, and say, "Do you want to cut your leg off?" Sanji replied, "You would have better luck in staying awake for 5 minutes straight before you can land a hot on me." Two hands bloomed on their backs and flicked them in the head as Robin said, "You two are going to be crewmates from now on. Try to act like it." This caused Sanji to swoon over her before deflating, remembering that she was taken by the rubber man and went to bring his stuff, and Zoro only returned to his sleeping position. This time on the ship so no one can bother him. The doors were then flung open by Luffy, who had a huge sack of meat on his back, as he said, "Come on guys, let's set sail to Nami." He then threw the bag, and it hit the unsuspecting Zoro, who from under it murmured, "I'm going to kill you one day." Robin promptly activated her power and dragged the man from under it. She then checked if his injuries were opened. She sighed when she made sure that he was fine. He then asked her, "Do you mind if I kill him someday?" The man replied by saying, "Do you mind being castrated?" This made him go pale as he crawled away from her, and yelled, "You're an evil woman. Do you hear me? You're evil." Robin couldn't help but giggle slightly at his reactions. She then looked at her boyfriend, who was talking with Jin. Perhaps, he was trying to convince him to join them on their journey. She blossomed an ear near them as she heard Luffy whine in defeat, saying, "Are you sure that you can't join us?" She giggled at his antics. She found them really lovable. The tanned man replied, "I'm sorry, Luffy. I'm really not interested in being a pirate anymore. Plus, Zeph offered us a job with my old crew here, so we're all good." They then heard a voice yell, Make way from Pearl, the mascot of the floating ship Baratie. The man was known dressed in a huge fish costume with a huge sign that said, "Baratie is the best." Both men then looked away as they snickered a little, but then Luffy said, "Fine, but it would have been cool having you as a crew member given how awesome you are." He added, "But if you ever feel like being a pirate anymore, make sure to join my crew." The man laughed as he said, "Alright, you have it, Luffy. If I ever felt that I want to be a pirate, then I'll make sure to call you." They both then went their separate ways. Luffy then boarded the ship as he had a sad expression that made Robin's heart feel like it was about to break as he said, "I wasn't able to get him. I really wanted him to be on my crew." Robin patted his back as she said, "Well, at least you have Sanji." The boy smiled at her and pecked her, making her blush as he said, "So are we ready to go to save Nami's village from that fish guy?" Zoro then said, "Well, still waiting for that dumb cook." He looked around and said, "Look, we have everything we need for food to everything. Robin is a wonderful chef. Come on, let's start rowing and leave the shitty cook behind." Robin retorted, "How about we vote on that notion?" She then smirked as she said, "All those who want Sanji, raise your hand." Both she and Luffy raised their hands as Zoro grumbled to himself, "Looks that you've been outvoted, so he can't do anything about that." Robin replied as she laughed at the swordsman who turned his head away from her. Was anger, or did his pride actually hurt? She didn't know. The doors of the Baratie were then flung open as Sanji walked from them. The man looked around him to see faces that he was used to, and faces that he punted from 2 days ago. He then looked at the ship that was about to take him, and he walked toward it. Before he can go, all the chefs began to cry, "We're going to miss you, Sanji." The man looked at them and said, fighting back his own tears, as he said, "Man up, you wimps." Zeph then appeared at the top of the Baratie as he said, "Take care, kid, and make sure not to catch a cold while you're at it out there." Sanji looked at the man who raised him from scratch and kneeled to the ground as he yelled with tears streaming from his eyes, "Owner Zeph, I thank you for everything that you have ever done for me." The man himself began to cry and wipe his tears away as he said, "Didn't I tell you that crying isn't something that men do, little eggplant?" Sanji then boarded the ship, as everyone began to say goodbye to the retreating ship. Not a couple of hours later, the sound of something being smashed into the ground echoed throughout the entire ship. The cause of this sound was Sanji kicking Luffy so hard that the rubber man now had bruises all over. Foot was steaming from the amount of kicking that he gave the rubber man. Robin came from the dock looking at her boyfriend, and yelled, "Oh dear goodness, Luffy." She then looked at Sanji saying, "What drove you to hurt him so much?" Sanji flinched as he saw Robin's worried state over Luffy. But he answered her saying, "Robin Schwan, I didn't do it because I wanted to, but because I needed to. The idiot was about to eat all our food supplies, so I had to stop him from leaving us to starve." The girl shook her head saying, "But there's no need to brutalize him that much. There's a reason for his actions. He doesn't do this out of hunger, but out of necessity to survive." The man tilted his head to the side as he wondered what the girl was talking about. Why would he need to eat like a one-man army? Seeing the confused look on his face, Robin explained, "You see, Luffy's devil fruit makes his body burn away nutrients faster than any regular human. So he needs to keep eating consistently, so his body doesn't slowly begin to fail him and die. Everything from him is rigorous. For example, something as simple as breathing air takes a lot out of him." The chef, hearing the explanation, was shocked as he began to rub his forehead, feeling a headache coming on full force. The man then sighed, "Alright Robin Schwan, I shouldn't have done that. I mean, I honestly thought that he was doing that out of gluttony, not that he really needed that amount of food." He then looked at Luffy as a thought rang through his head, "And when were you planning to tell this little bit of information, Luffy? Because, for the looks of it, it seems that you weren't planning on doing that." The man looked at his captain, whose face was healed instantly for some reason. Maybe due to his fruit. Luffy then puckered his lips together as he avoided the chef's gaze, saying, "I think tomorrow." "Yeah, I was about to tell you that tomorrow." This caused the blonde-haired man's eyes to bug out because Luffy was a seriously bad liar. He grabbed the rubber man by his nose and started to stretch it as he scolded, "You idiot, you were planning not to tell me about that, weren't you? What part about me being the chef of this boat that didn't make it to your head? Tell me, because something like that is one of my jobs." He dropped the boy to the ground as he said, "At least, I now have an idea about this, so I can think of something to counter it with." He looked at Robin and said, "I'll be back in a moment with a health plan for this genius." Robin looked at Luffy as she crossed her arms and huffed, saying, "Luffy, did you try to trick me when you told me that you were planning to tell the chef of our crew about your condition?" She looked away from him with a small pout on her face, causing the boy to feel horrible. He quickly waved his hands as he tried to explain to her what happened. "Come on Robin, you know I didn't mean that, but I just don't want to worry the crew about me. I'm the captain. I'm supposed to protect them, not the other way around." This caused the girl to sigh as she turned to her boyfriend. She began to poke him in the chest, saying, "Luffy, you're the captain, and no one argues with that. But tell me, what will happen if the captain died in the middle of the journey? What will happen if we lost you? What will happen if I lost you?" He could see trickles of tears in her eyes and he felt horrible. He quickly hugged her, saying, "I'm really sorry that I worried you, Robin. I promise from now on I'll never disregard my health." He then wiped her tears away. She smiled at him and kissed him on the nose and said, "I'd really appreciate that, Luffy." They then began to rub their noses against each other in a show of affection that caused Zoro, who entered the room, to grab a drink to leave it immediately. Sanji then walked in as he held a small piece of paper in his hand and said, "Guys, I have the perfect food schedule for our resident black hole over here." He finished as he pointed at Luffy. Robin stood up and asked, "What are planning, Sanji? It has to be good, and I can't promise even with that Luffy will stop his raids on the fridge." The man sighed as he said, "I expected much, but I can't help it now." The plan was tailored to give him a sufficient amount of energy during the entire day, and regarding the fridge thing, "I'm sorry Robin Schwan, but I have to beat him." The woman waved her hands saying, "I don't mind, but try not to hit him too hard. We still need him to live after all." This caused the rubber man to cross his arms and huff. The chef then began to explain the plan. "Alright, the plan will start with a huge breakfast which includes a huge amount of carbs, followed by a huge lunch containing a huge amount of meat and protein, and finally a good dinner for him. Of course, given his condition, I'll put some snacks in between the main meals, and put some leftovers from him in case he needed to eat after dinner. And by the way, you might need to bring a doctor soon enough to help us with this." The woman nodded as she looked at Luffy, who nodded his head. She bowed to Sanji saying, "Thank you, Sanji, for being so caring toward us." Sanji then began to swirl around like a noodle in happiness as he said, "Of course, anything to make you happy, Robin Schwan." His state was stopped by a punch for Luffy. After separating Luffy and Sanji from ripping each other to bits, Robin sat down to Sanji and began to explain to him what happened with Nami, and how he needs to prepare himself to possibly fight against an enemy even though he just joined not a couple of hours ago. The man said, "I understand, and I'm willing to die for Nami Swan. I'll be her knight in shining armor, and protect her." He then took a thinking position as he began to wonder out loud, "I wonder if she's a mermaid." Luffy, who heard him, then began to draw a picture of a mermaid which looked like a fish with legs and pointed one at Sanji saying, "Like this." The man laughed a little as he said, "This more of a merman." Luffy then tried again, producing the same result, but this time with hair on its head, causing the man to yell at him, "Stop ruining my fantasies." Zoro from the side interrupted their discussion as he said, "I think we should focus more on the part regarding us fighting the fishmen and try to gather like the information we know about this Arlong guy." He looked at Robin, who to him looked like a walking bank of information. "So what do you have on him?" The girl quirked an eyebrow before saying, "I know some information from the newspapers I used to read, but other than that I don't know much. Arlong the Saw. He originally used to be an underwater prison known as Impelled Down, but he was released one day without explanation." Sanji asked, "Just like this? I doubt the Marines just release someone. I've heard that whoever enters Impelled Down never lives to see the sunlight ever again." Robin nodded her head as she said, "That's true, but in Arlong's case, he had someone from the outside supporting him. His name was Jinbei." This caused Sanji to quirk an eyebrow and ask, "And what's so special about him that Marines released a prisoner from that fancy prison of theirs? Don't tell me that he's royalty or something." The girl shook her head as she asked, "Do you know about the dominating powers in the Grand Line, Sanji?" The man shook his head, shocking the girl, and Luffy said, "Really, I mean even I know about them too." This caused both Sanji and Zoro to stare at him like he grew another head. The boy then asked, "Did I say something wrong?" Zoro said, "No, we're just shocked that you know stuff. You don't seem like that type of person." This made the boy slump down in defeat and self-loathing as he said, "It's just not my fault. I studied really hard. Why do people still think that I'm dumb?" Robin patted his back as she sent a dirty glare toward both Zoro and Sanji. The first only looked away mildly ashamed, while the second seemed that he was about to die since he made Robin angry with him. The girl sighed as she told her boyfriend, "Their opinion bear. I love you just fine." The dark-haired girl continued to explain, "In the Grand Line, there are 3 dominant powers. The first one being the Marines, the second being the pirates, and the last being the Shichibuka, commonly known as the warlords. The last faction is kind of the Marines' guard dogs among the pirates. They're like legal pirates." Sanji asked, "And why in the hell do the Marines need legal pirates? Running low on human bodies to use meat walls for the higher-ups. Instead, they hired some wannabe pirates to do the dirty job for them. Seems kinda pathetic." Luffy began to laugh at this point as he said, "Wannabe? Those guys are the best of the best. They're no joke, Sanji." Again, Sanji was shocked that Luffy knew that, but hid his shock. Robin continued to explain by saying, "You see, the warlords like the Marines Protection Squad in Grand Line. Their mission is to weed out any small-time pirate they come across, and the stronger ones are the ones who usually slip through their fingers or left to the Marines to hunt down and rip apart. In fact, Hawkeye is actually one of them." This caused Zoro to scowl, remembering his defeat. Zoro then rubbed the back of his head as he said, "It's educational and all, but what the hell does this have to do with our fishy friend that you just talked about?" "Well, the reason Arlong is out from prison is due to Jinbei. He pledged for him, allowing his release as a bigger deal with the Marines, which all the fishmen prisoners from Impelled Down. Sanji scratched his head. Let me guess. He's one of the warlords who allowed to make a huge deal. The girl shook her head saying, it was the reason why he joined the warlords. It is said that the Marines wanted to make a good relationship with the Fishman Island, so they struck a deal with Jinbei that said he becomes one of their warlords, and they release all the fishmen from the prison. Sanji at this point began to zone out as he said, Fishman Island. I heard that it's a beautiful place to go to if you wanted to have a vacation. I wonder if there are beautiful mermaids there. I think that would make it really wonderful. The girl sighed noticing that man was lost, but she noticed that Zoro was at least paying attention, so she carried on. Arlong went from inside the prison, and went off the radar a couple of years back when it was said that he entered the Grand Line. Zoro then said, I understand, so the gist of this thing is that Fish Boy got out of prison, came here to the East Blue, and conquered Nami's home. But what I don't know is why that he didn't continue his conquest of the East Blue. The girl giggled as she said, because he's not dumb. Our grandpa is a very strong marine from here. If he heard that some pirate rookie came to attack their home island, he would fry him alive. Zoro only nodded as he said, alright, now it's a matter of time before we reach the island of Nami. Let's just hope nothing wrong happens. I'm not worried for Nami though. I worried that the Three Stooges would do something stupid that might ruin everything. Robin, Luffy, and Sanji looked into the horizon hoping the same thing. Back with Nami, the girl looked into the viewing in front of her. Her island was only a couple of miles away, and she put on her best A-game face. She looked at the Three Stooges as she called them during the previous days, and they really proved her when they spent most of their time playing cards. She saw them doing exactly the same thing that they were doing from the beginning, playing cards. She went to each of them and punted each of them on the head, causing huge lumps on their head, as they groaned in pain. She yelled at them, what the heck are you doing? Didn't I tell you to be ready for the mission? Usopp groaned as he said, listen up, you can't treat the great Usopp like that woman. Now bow down and beg for forgiveness. His demand was met by a huge punch which left Nami with a steaming fist as she said, any more complaints? The other two stood like soldiers and saluted her as she said, good, now enough goofing around. We approaching my home, and if you're seen with me, this will cause all of us unwanted trouble. Yosaku asked, so what do you recommend we do? Do we hide inside the interior of the ship, or do we pretend to be your lackeys? The girl shook her head as she said, no, of course not. If Arlong sees any of you, he will kill you all on sight, and everything I've been working for will be destroyed. That's counting if he doesn't sabotage away from our deal. Usopp, who now was rubbing his head from pain, said, so we need to escape the ship before you reach his base. The girl gave him an affirmative as he said, okay, so where are you planning to leave, or better yet where do we go and hide during the time that you are meeting Arlong, cause I'm sure that if we just began to wander around aimlessly, this will draw Arlong's attention, and he will come for us to turn us into a human pretzel. The girl hummed for a little bit agreeing with him, before she snapped her fingers saying, go and hide inside my sister's house. Just tell her that Nami sent you, and she won't ask too many questions hopefully. Her name is Najiko. The boy then said as he looked away, are you really sure you want us to hide inside your sister's home? I mean, this could cause trouble for both of you in the long run. That's if we choose to ignore the looming threat that the fishman represents, so I propose that I stay as far away as possible from the island altogether. This caused the girl to bite her lip, but shook her head saying, no worries, I have everything covered, and stop being such a wimp. Johnny asked, okay, so where are going to dump us before we reach the island? He said as he looked hoping to see some shore that can land on, before going to Nami's sister's house. Nami called out for all three of them as she said, look, I'll drop you all over there. The three went to the side of the ship as Usopp scanned the surrounding area saying, oi Nami, are you sure that there's somewhere you can drop us here? I'm sure there's nothing but what? Ah. The man screamed with the other two as they fell from the boat and splashed into the unforgiving cold water. They all looked up at Nami with annoyed expressions as she said, sorry guys, but can't take you any closer, or else I'll be discovered. Have a nice swim. The girl then set sail leaving the three men floundering in the water as Usopp yelled, at least, you could have brought us closer to the island. He sighed as he looked at his two companions saying, come on, this is going to be a long swim. They all began to toward the island hoping to avoid contact with the fishman. On the island itself, a flag that had the image of a saw shark flapped on the top of a building that had a saw shark design. In the shades of the said building sat a man that looked like a blue humanoid with a sharp nose and a huge frame. The man slammed a huge stack of money on a table in front of him saying, here's the money from the month. The man in front of him had a mousy-like face with whiskers as he said, thank you. It is a pleasure to do business with you as usual. It's been an honor. The most striking feature about the man was that he was wearing a marine uniform. The man then added, this sure is a lot of money. Does this mean that your business has been going fine, Arlong? The fishman known as Arlong then said, why are you even asking about that? My business is always booming, and you know what they say, money makes the world go around. On the fishman's right stood another fishman. He was a humanoid that looked like a manta ray hybrid. He was known as Karubi. To the left of Arlong, a fishman who said his lips point outward stood. He was known as Chu. Arlong then laughed a little bit more as he said, "Money is good. There's nothing more reliable than money in this world." The Marine now stood up as he went up to leave as Arlong said, "Why are you always in such a hurry? Stay for a little bit longer. You're one of the few humans in tolerate since you see the world for what it is." The Marine said, "Now, I really need to go now. See you next month during our next payment. Take care." The man with his men was then met with an octopus-looking fish man who waved friendly at the Marines and told them, "Get on the octopus pod, so that I can take you home." He was one of Arlong's closet men known as Hachi. The Marines boarded a pot in the opening that led to the opening of the sea beside the structure known as Arlong Park. And then Hachi dove into the water dragging the pot away and taking the Marines to where they came from in the first place. The Marine man said, "Fishmen really makes my skin crawl, but nothing that money can't solve." Outside Arlong Park, Nami stood as she saw a little boy approach the park with a death wish in his eyes. The boy held a small knife in his hand and was looking at the park like a man on a mission. She stood there waiting for him to approach her, but once he did, he yelled at her saying, "Get out of my way. I'm going to kill Arlong." The girl still standing there didn't do anything. The boy then yelled once more saying, "I said get out of my way or I'll kill you. Arlong killed my father, so I came here to kill him for that, so move." The boy didn't get to finish his sentence as Nami brought out her staff and hit him with it, sending him to the ground. The boy lay there crying his eyes out, but Nami dropped a stack of money in front of him as she said, "Arlong doesn't have time for brats. Have this money, and go away. Use it for your protection." Nami knew the boy's pain all too much. She herself wanted to kill Arlong when he killed her mother, but she couldn't do it, and the only thing that saved her from death was the deal that she struck with him, so unless the boy had some drawing skills like her, he was going to die. The girl calmly entered the park as she was greeted by Arlong who said, "Boys, look who's back. It sure took you some time this time." The girl shrugged as she said, "I hit a huge load this time. I needed to make sure that I tried the people that I worked with. Though I have to say, it was really hard leaving them this time. It felt like my heart was about to break." The fishman then began to laugh at her saying, "And since when you of all people had a heart? I wouldn't believe it even if I saw it happening in front of me." He then yelled to everyone, "My fishman brothers, our precious comrade has returned. Let's celebrate and have a huge party in her honor." Nami could only smile as she hoped that when she finishes counting the money she will be free of Arlong. On a shore not too far away from Arlong Park, the three who were with Nami finally reached land as Usopp said, "Let's not do this again." Johnny then said as he lifted himself, "I think we made to a toe www." The words died inside his mouth as he looked around with Usopp and Yosaku in horror at the scene in front of them. The entire town that they landed in was turned upside down, literally. Buildings' roofs were put on the ground, whereas the bases of the building were pointing to the sky. Usopp took a couple of steps back as he swallowed his saliva in fear, and said, "Is that what we're going up against? These people are insane. I mean, what kind of monster can turn buildings upside down? I think that we should leave. I can't fight those fishman disease." He was smacked by both Johnny and Yosaku. Johnny then said, "So the rumors were true. I heard that a town inside the Komoni Islands tried to rebel against Arlong. It was said that he demolished it, but at the time I thought it was just exaggerations. Turns out, the news about Goso was true." Yosaku then added, "So, the tales that say that fishmen are born 10 times stronger than a human are true. This is the strength of the monsters from the Grand Line, and this is the fate of those who enrages Arlong." He and Johnny bolted quickly, leaving a confused Usopp behind. The boy then heard someone from behind him say, I never thought there would be survivors of Gosa. Arlong made sure to destroy you all. Never mind now, I'll just take him to you to determine your fate." Behind him stood a rather chubby fishman which to him resembled a puffer fish. Usopp didn't need to be told twice, but his legs worked faster than his head as he began to run saying, "You want me, you had to catch me." All the while the fishman could only look in shock. He then shook himself out of his stupor and yelled, "Hey, wait." Away from sight, both Johnny and Yosaku stood by each other as they breathed sighs of relief. "Wow, that was a close one. I almost thought he got us back there," Johnny commented. Yosaku replied to him, "We will tell brother Luffy and Zoro about he sacrificed himself to save us in a brave show of heroism." Both men nodded their heads as they cried tears for their fallen comrade. Usopp continued to run quickly away from the fishman, but in his way stood a little boy who suddenly yelled at him, "You dirty fishman killed my father, I will take revenge for him." The boy then tripped him, causing him to roll on the ground. When he stopped, lifted a sword, and yelled, "Die, Arlong." Usopp could have sworn he saw his life flash before his eyes when the blade was lifted above his head. The boy then brought it down toward the long-nosed boy who was half minute ago from fainting, but Usopp swore at that moment that his guardian angel came to save him from death. She was a blue-haired girl who eerily looked like Nami of all people. The girl smacked the boy upside the head, and took his weapon away from him saying, "Calm down, and look at him. He may look like Arlong, but he's human like you and me." The boy who now took a deep breath looked at the long-nosed boy, and nodded his head saying, "He is human like us, isn't he?" although he barely looks like one. Usopp screamed, "First you try and kill me, now you're insulting my looks. What's wrong with you, kid?" They were cut from their talk when someone shouted in the distance, "Hey you, wait right there. I'm gonna get you this time." It was the fishman that saw Usopp from earlier. This caused him to panic, but he had to hide it for the sake of the two that were with him. The little boy then yelled, "It's a fishman," to which the blue-haired lady confirmed, "It is, isn't it? And a real one this time around." This caused a vein to throb on Usopp's head, but he swallowed it to protect the two. He looked at the two behind him and said, "Run away from here and let me handle this. It's just one fishman. I'm sure I can manage him on my own. So go away and hide." Usopp now stood facing the fishman, who laughed saying, "Standing still I see. You must want to be killed quickly this day. Let me guess, you have nowhere to run anymore." Usopp smirked as she said, "On the contrary, today is the day that I captained Usopp the Great end your reign of terror." The boy then took out his slingshot as he aimed at the fishman and said, "Special attack. Certain death." The boy didn't get to finish his attack as he fell unconscious when the blue-haired lady punted him with a hammer. She pulled out of thin air as she said, "Don't harm the fishman." 3 hours later in a small house surrounded by an orange orchid, Usopp woke up from his deep sleep as he looked around in panic. He then heard someone say, "Looks like you're up now. Did you have a nice sleep? Before you ask, you're in my house right now." He began to scan the house as he said, "You're that lady from before, and where is that fishman?" The girl looked at him before saying, "You don't need to worry about him anymore. He's gone for now, but don't do any stupid stunts like that anymore. Those only cause trouble." She looked at the boy before adding, "And by the way, the name's Nejiko." She then pointed to the boy beside her on the table and said, "And the brat over here is Chabo." Usopp then yelled, "How can you talk to me so causally after you knocked me out when I wanted to help? What are you, some kind of fishman mole or something?" He then remembered that Nami told him he was Nejiko. The girl closed her eyes as she looked away from him. "If anyone needs to be thanked, it's me. Today, I saved 2 idiots from losing their life over a worthless endeavor." She gave him a side glance before sighing, and saying, "Although I don't blame you honestly, you're an outsider. You don't know how things work around her, but you." She looked at the boy from Gosa, and said, "You're from Gosa, and you know how strong the fishmen are, but yet you decided to go and kill yourself, why?" The boy began to clutch his clothes as his breathing became rigorous as he said, "I know that, but that monster attacked my town. And to add to that, he sent some type of huge beast against it that destroyed everything. I know that I can't harm them, but I just can't forget that they killed my dad. I just want my revenge." Usopp's eyes widened in panic as he said, "Huge beast you say?" He then remembered that he noticed that there were some weird dents in the ground in Gosa. So those weird tracks in the ground back in Gosa? The boy nodded as he said, "Yeah, they're from the beast that destroyed the village. They said that the beast was brought over from the Grand Line." This caused Usopp's jaw to hit the ground as he began to imagine in fear the monsters that awaits him in the Grand Line. The boy then continued his story as he said, "I tried to go to Arlong himself, but when I reached his park, a girl with orange hair beat me up and told me to scram. She stopped me from my revenge, and now I want her dead too." The reaction that Usopp got from Nejiko caused him to spit the juice he was drinking as the weapon replied saying, "Go ahead and die." The woman then said, "You can head now to Arlong Park and try to kill him, but put in mind that you'll just go to die at the end of the day, so be sure to count your blessings since me and the girl saved your life twice today." She then added, "When you finish your tea, get out of my house to go and die. I don't have time for idiots like you." This caused Usopp to become angry. Nami's sister or not, this was no way to talk to a young child like that. "Hey, he's just a kid. You can't just talk to him like that. Have some sympathy." Nejiko replied coolly as she said, "So what? If he's going to die like a dog, then what difference does it make? This desire of his is making throw his life away from granted." Usopp's veins popped as his face took a demonic look and said, "What's wrong with you?" Meanwhile, Chabo continued to cry silently from his father's death, to what happened back at Arlong Park, to what was happening now. He then heard Nejiko say, "I know a person that chose a life that makes death look like heaven." She then screamed at him saying, "That's why I absolutely hate brats like you. Those who only think about rushing to an early death to satisfy their needs." The boy then said through choked breaths, "What am I supposed to do now? They killed my father, and I can't even fight back. What am I supposed to do with all this hate I harbor?" Nokiji then asked, "What about your mom?" The boy sniffed his tears away as he said, "She's still alive." The blue-haired woman smiled at the young boy and said, "Then go back to her, she must be worried sick about you." It was a little while later when Chabo left Nejiko's house. Usopp said, "I guess you're just like Nami then. You both use tough love as a way to help others." The woman's eyes widened as she asked, "And how do you know that name exactly?" Usopp only chuckled as he said, "I'm her crewmate. She threw off the ship that I was riding with her and told." He was cut off by Nejiko who said, "Sorry buddy, but if you came all this way to get revenge on her, then you're in. I know that she's with Arlong. She told us everything. We're pirates too. Nami told us to help her gather all the remaining money she needed to buy her village," the boy explained. Nijiko was shocked that Nami trusted pirates of all people, and asked for their help, so she asked, "And what are your plan now that you helped her gather enough money to buy the entire town given that you know her story that is?" "Well, I'm not sure, but my captain thinks that Arlong will try to cheat his way out of the deal, so I guess we'll just have to fight if that happened," Usopp said, shivering at the notion of fighting against a fishman only to get punched by Nijiko. The blue-haired lady then yelled, "Is your captain insane? Does he want to ruin all of Nami's hard effort over the years? The fishman's rule?" Usopp rubbed his cheek due to the pain he was experiencing at the moment. He looked at Nami's sister who was currently trying to kill him with her glare. She would have succeeded given how fearsome she looked at the moment, but Usopp pulled himself up and yelled, "What the heck was that for? Is that how you treat your guests?" Nijiko arched an eyebrow, and what followed were sounds of punches and kicks with Usopp beating to a pulp after it. He knew at that moment that he should choose his words wisely, so he asked, "Can I know why you turned into a hostile threat to my safety all of a sudden?" The blue-haired girl, now calm or as calm as she can be, given that someone just mentioned ruining her sister's life work, casually said, "Are you morons insane? You want to die? My sister has been working her entire life to fulfill the debt to Arlong, and you people want to come along and simply ruin everything." This remark caused Usopp to tilt his head in confusion. He was pretty darn sure he mentioned that they will only attack the fishman if he played chicken and back out of the deal. The boy replied, "Are you sure you heard what I said?" The girl continued to glare at him. "I said we'll attack if he broke the deal with Nami. We know how important his deal is." He thought for a moment and added, "Although to be honest, my captain does favor beating him up. He respected Nami's wishes that she wants this to be resolved peacefully." This didn't help alleviate Nijiko's worries. If anything, it even made them worse. She looked at the boy with the fury of 1,000 angry harpies, and said, "So your captain is suicidal, and the only reason he hasn't stormed Arlong's base is my sister wanting him to stay on the side." The look of anger disappeared as she said, "Why does my sister get associated with wired people?" She then began to rub her forehead. Usopp then said, "Look, I know that the fishmen have been wreaking havoc here for years, but we won't do anything unless Nami wants us to. Plus, you aren't even sure if he's going to honor his word at the end of the day. That's the only reason my captain even suggested beating him up, because something sounds fishy here, and I'm not talking about the fishman." Nijiko looked at him, and even though she was still angry at him and his captain for even suggesting fighting Arlong, they made a few good points. What guarantee there is that Arlong will actually stay true to his word? It was well known that he bribed the local marines to turn a blind eye to all his crimes. What is the guarantee that he wouldn't send them to take all the money her sister stored all those years? The guarantee ironically was Arlong's love for money, but that still wasn't enough to stop him if he wanted Nami to stay in his crew. What was worse than that is the people who wanted to face him are Nami's friends. She could imagine how scared she was when they told her that they wanted to fight him. She doesn't want them to die, not for her sake at least. Nijiko then said, "Look, I know you guys mean well, and I'm sorry for punching you, but I think it's for the best that when your captain arrives that you all leave the island. You people don't know how the world works around here. You'll only cause trouble for yourself and us." Usopp on the other hand didn't look convinced. Sure, he was deathly afraid of facing off against fishmen, but he was still going to do it because he was going to be a brave warrior of the sea. He stared at her a little bit and asked the million-berry question, "Alright, suppose that I left the island, and we didn't face off against Arlong and his goons. What will you do if Arlong backed out of the deal then?" The girl didn't answer him, but her silence was all that he needed to hear. They didn't have anything to do, if that ever happened, or they could attack themselves, which by itself is a huge catastrophe since they'd be walking to their death. He looked her in the eyes and said, "So the best thing you have at the moment is a transparent dream of Arlong agreeing to honor his deal. And at the same time you refuse any type of help or assistance since it contradicts the way of life you all are used to." He massaged his forehead. "You know this is going to be hypocritical coming out of me of all people, but you can't hide from your problems forever." Nijiko only frowned at him. "You don't get it. These are fishmen we're talking about. They're stronger than a normal human. Of course, we're hoping that he will honor his deal, but we can't do anything if he doesn't." Nijiko crossed her arms. "So please, when Nami comes back, take your boat and leave this island. Don't end your life in an impossible mission. You people don't even understand what you're standing against." Usopp still wasn't convinced. Sure, he was a coward, but he knew that eventually, he'll have to face Fishman in the Grand Line. The rumors regarding Arlong say that he was from the Grand Line, so if anything they'd be only delaying the inevitable. They were going to clash against Fishmen whether they wanted or not, and knowing Luffy, he'll definitely want that. He replied, "Look, we're going to the Grand Line, so you have to know that we're going to come across foes that are tougher than Fishmen and Fishmen themselves, so it can't be helped." The blue-haired lady bit her lip. She knew he was right, but at the same time, she didn't want her island to be turned into a pirate's testing ground or dueling arena. She wanted a solution for the Arlong problem years back, but what can she hope to achieve at this point? She sighed as she said, "Look, come with me, and I'll let you see the situation for yourself. Maybe then you'll be convinced to leave the island." We don't need more problems than there already are. We have enough on our plate. The boy nodded as the woman stood up, and ushered for him to follow her to her town. He didn't know what she hoped to achieve from this, but he knew he can't just run away. Luffy depended on him to help Nami, so he will do just that. He will find a way to help her and her village. He just hopes that he won't enter something that's way over his head. Back in Arlong Park, Nami was celebrating with Arlong on her return to the island. She was now downing a huge cup of booze that could knock out an elephant. The only one who can compete with her was Arlong himself. The rest were soft, and couldn't handle it, although the manta ray man always hated her for it. Their party was suddenly stopped when someone crashed through the gates. Arlong, there was a human for Gosa village that tried to attack us. Where are your orders? The blue fish man looked at him, and asked, what did he look like, so I can catch him when I find him? The other man blinked for a little as he replied, I think he had a long nose and was wearing a yellow bandana. Arlong put his bottle of booze down as he said, I think he might be ending in Kokoyashi given that it's the nearest village he can go to. He rubbed his chin, I had to go there too since something came up. Nami meanwhile could only curse Usopp for attracting the fishman's attention. Usopp followed Nijiko to Kokoyashi, her village and Nami's end goal, but when they arrived, she pointed him in a certain direction, and told him, watch. The boy was confused, not getting the point of this, till he popped his head out and looked at the center of the village. In the center, a man with many scars sat under an umbrella as he watched the people go on with their day. Someone was selling someone else food. Children were playing around on the streets with their mothers yelling at them to stop. Some people were sitting and reading the news about the world while others were just daydreaming. All of their activities were going well till someone came yelling, Arlong, he's coming to the village. Did anyone of you fail to pay him this month? The individual screamed, afraid that his village might face the same fate that befell Gosa village. One of the villagers then replied, of course, we always give our money hand to hand and in front of everyone, so this raised more questions about the reasons Arlong might come till the scarred man replied, he's probably coming for me since they found a weapon collection in my house. The man was known as Genzo, and he was the town's mayor of sorts. Everyone looked at him worried, but he said, I want everyone to enter their houses, because things may get messy if he arrives and sees all of you here. He noticed that they were still standing, so he yelled, what did I say? Go and hide. Everyone then ran into their houses like their dear life hanging onto a thread, but once they entered their homes they were plastered to the windows waiting for what was coming to happen. Genzo sat alone under the umbrella that was protecting him from the sun, but he suddenly felt a larger shadow above him. Arlong, to what pleasure do I owe this visit? The blue fish man laughed, are you getting old, Genzo, or are you playing dumb? We both know why I came today. The fish man looked at him directly in the eye as he added, aren't you the one who was caught having weapons in his house? Genzo nodded, knowing that lying at this point will only bring destruction to his town. True, I won't lie about this, but it's a simple hobby that I had since I was a child. I always liked to look at weapons. He looked down at the ground. Are hobbies now a crime and forbidden? Arlong chuckled as he said, yes, in your case, it's forbidden. You see, I hate weapons since they only breed hatred and war. And I personally don't like war. Weapons also bring the instruments that are meant to destroy peaceful places, so I'm against it. Back with Usopp, he gaped at Arlong's size. Wow, that's huge, and I thought Krieg was a monster. This guy looks like he can bench press him with all of his crew. Yes, that's Arlong. Nijiko said, he's inhuman. He's a fish man. So do you get why you need to leave now before things get even worse for you? At this point, the boy was focusing on the interaction between both parties. Arlong said, listen here, I have 20 villages under my control, and quite recently rebels have been popping up left and right. You don't have any hand in it, do you? The man wanted to glare at him, but he knew that Arlong will use this as an excuse to level the village on their heads, so he replied, I have no idea what you're talking about. I can barely walk, I can barely feed myself, how do you think that I can fund rebels? A lot of the fishmen were agitated at the way their leader was, but Arlong wasn't bothered. True. What you're saying is true. He then added, but because of those rebellions villages are being demolished. Just like Gosa, they thought that they can challenge their superiors and they ultimately paid the price. That was a lesson for the other villages to learn from. And I hope it went to all of you that if someone fails to pay the tribute, everyone suffers alongside him. With Usopp, the long-nosed boy looked at Nijiko as he said, he's serious. I thought the tribute was optional. The girl shook her head as she said, the tribute is practically the price for our lives. Arlong says as long as we can breathe, we can pay. No one is exempted from this. Men, women, the elders, children. Everyone has to pay it, or else we're all destroyed. Gosa was an example that. One man failed to pay, though he begged Arlong for one more day. The village was destroyed and turned into rubble. You saw the handiwork there. Usopp's eyes almost popped from his head as he said, all that for one person. Is that a little overboard? I mean, couldn't he let them off with a warning? Nijiko smiled as she felt like he was joking, but she shook her head. That's the life under Arlong. With his radical racial views, killing a human to them is liking drinking water to us. This left Usopp shocked as he couldn't imagine someone being so trigger-happy. Well, there is Kuro, but he's a special kind of evil. Arlong in the center of town opened his arms as he yelled, "Hear me well, people of Kokoyashi. All you have to do here is collect money and give me your tribute. This is your life mission. You don't need to worry about anything else. I need enormous sums of money and you can provide." He looked at the sky as he yelled louder, "Because thanks to your tribute, conquering the East Blue will become attainable. This will be known as the beginning of the Arlong Empire." Usopp looked at him with wide eyes as he said, "Arlong Empire? Is that even possible?" He went pale as he remembered his hometown. "Does that mean my hometown too?" He remembered Kaya and fear began to run through his veins. The girl was already weak, but she was returning to her health. If Arlong made his move, Kaya would be hurt and go back to square one. Nijiko replied with nonchalance, "Well, whatever is going to happen will happen, so I can only advise you to go back to your loved ones and spend as much time as you can with them. In the meanwhile, we can only sit and watch." She stopped for a moment before adding, "For the time being, that is." The time being, Usopp wondered before he heard a grunt. He looked over the side with Nijiko only to see Arlong manhandling Genzo who was bleeding from his head. The fishman held the guy as he said, "Weapons to me are a sign of rebellion. To me, it is a sign that someone is trying to disturb the peace that I worked hard to achieve in my lands." He shook the man as he talked to him. The man was silent as Arlong carried on. "So, just to be sure no one gets any funny ideas, how about I end you all together? This way we won't have more worrying hobbies on our hands." Usopp was stunned as he said, "What, all of this for some weapons?" He looked to his side only to find a space. He noticed that Nijiko had already left him and ran toward the center. "Are you insane? That guy is going to kill if you go any closer." The girl didn't pay any mind to that as she made her way to the center. She yelled at the fishman, "What do you think you're doing, Arlong? We all paid the tribute like we always did. You know that out of all of the villages, Kokoyashi is the most loyal to you. How can you even think that we're thinking about rebelling against you?" She clenched her fist as he said, "So let go of General." People tried to stop her but to no avail. Arlong looked at her. "I did say that weapons are a clear sign of rebellion, didn't I? And yet, he broke the rule. He left me no choice but to kill him." He gained a vicious smile. "Or do you prefer the fate of Gosa where I destroyed the entire village on your heads?" He got the desired effect when everyone went quiet. Arlong began to laugh arrogantly as he began to taunt everyone. "Listen here, US bags, if you as so much lay a finger on any of us, you won't live to see another day in this village. It won't remain another hour." Everyone looked at him in fear knowing that their tyrant for the last 8 years is serious in his threats. Genzo looked at the people looking at him with fear in their eyes for him, but he also saw that they were about to fight. That would cause a huge problem down the line. It would all the sacrifices that were made to become dust. He didn't want that, so he said, "Everyone, go inside your houses. There's nothing to see here. If we wanted to resist we would have done that years ago, and if we do it now all of our efforts in the last 8 years will be thrown down the drain, so please don't do anything stupid for my sake." He took a deep breath adding, "We all swore that we'll live, didn't we? Doing this we'd be throwing that promise away. We must keep enduring to live." All the villagers looked at him unsure what to do. On one hand, they knew he was right, but on the other one, how can they stand idle and watch one of their friends and neighbors get killed without moving a muscle? Arlong laughed, grabbing the man's head as he mocked him. "Well said. Living is important because if you live, you get to enjoy life." He then proceeded to smash his face into a wooden beam much to the villagers' horror. Everyone in their lives must know their position and status, and you see this man right, he knows that resistance is futile, so he accepted his fate. Everyone gaped in fright as Arlong lifted Genzo bloodied forming declaring, "You need to know something that not everyone in this world is born equal." He then threw Genzo to the ground. Humans are best living under the dirt. The villagers began to get slowly railed up as voices of anger began to fill the area causing Arlong to smirk under his breath. But Genzo quickly lifted his hand saying, "No, don't kill yourselves. If we all die here everything will come to an end, you all must live on." Arlong grabbed Genzo from the waist. "Let this be an example to any idiot who harbors thoughts of rebelling against us. Watch closely." Arlong swung toward the ground, "as I make a warning of him to the rest of you." The fishman was able to finish as a huge explosion enveloped him, gunpowder explosion. A voice that no one recognized rang out. This caused Arlong to let go of Genzo who fell to the ground with a thud. This by itself caused a new issue for the fishmen. How did this? They received their answers when someone yelled, "Look over here." All the fishmen looked at him as they yelled, "Identify yourself. Who do you think you are?" Usopp merely laughed, putting on his best brave facade. "You don't know who I am. Pity, I Captain Usopp of the Usopp Pirates, conqueror of hundreds of countries and islands." The fishmen looked unimpressed. "Usopp doesn't really ring a bell." "No, I don't. I ever heard of him." Usopp continued with his rant. "I have thousands of followers that will obey my every command to the letter." Meanwhile down there, the villagers looked at him shocked as they wondered who he was except Nijiko. At this moment, Arlong stood up growling, "You say you have thousands of followers. I couldn't care less, since I'll just stump them all." He looked at the long-nosed and he couldn't be less impressed. One of Arlong's subordinates yelled, "Boss, he's that guy from Gosa village." This caused Arlong to pale as he said, "Oh no, he caught me, and he isn't afraid of my lies." Arlong snarled, "Even though you're just a mere human, you dared to attack me." In a blink of an eye, Arlong was beside the house that Usopp was standing on. The man lifted the house as he yelled, "Filthy little bug, learn your place." He then threw the house away, causing it to smash into another house. This caused the boy to hold onto it for dear life, as Arlong's men looked at their boss, and one of them said, "Boss, please calm down. If you continue like this, you'll destroy this village." Another added, "It's easy to destroy them, but we need the funds." The blue fish man scoffed, "If I destroy it, then we'll conquer another village to make up for the lost funds of this island." Meanwhile, a fish man looked and yelled, "Look, he's still alive." This caused Arlong to yell, "Go and catch him. Bring him to Arlong Park to decide his fate." The other fishmen nodded their heads to avoid their leader's wrath, as they knew not to annoy him when he was in a bad mood. Usopp landed on the ground as he looked behind him and saw fishmen coming for him, so he ran like the wind. "Hey you, stop right there." The boy turned and used his slingshot, certain kill Eggstar. The projectile hit the fishman's face as he began to complain from the horrible smell. This caused all of them to look with anger at Usopp, who quickly ran away with a huge burst of speed, so he can keep his life and not die today. Back in the village, the villagers began to swarm Genzo, who Arlong left alone in rage after he was attacked. One of them said, "Jen, are you alright? Arlong messed you up really bad this time." The man lifted his hand as he said, "I'm fine, so please don't worry yourselves about me. I'm sure that I can manage." He looked at the ground as he added, "And I'm sorry for all the trouble that I caused." Genzo knew that if he didn't have that weapon collection, then Arlong wouldn't have used that as an excuse to attack the village and terrorize its citizens. All of the villagers voiced their opinions, reassuring the man that he wasn't at fault, but it was their ruler's ridiculous laws and rules that caused what happened today. One of the villagers asked him, "Jen, do you have any idea who was that boy who saved at the last moment?" Genzo rubbed his chin. He had never seen the boy before, so he simply shook his head as he said, "I'm afraid that I'm unfamiliar with him. I never saw him before in my entire life." The other villagers nodded their heads, but they all turned to a voice, "Hey, what's going on?" They looked at the source with looks of anger, disgust, and disdain. The villagers began to slowly empty the town square, not wanting to interact with Nami, who looked at them and felt extremely hurt, but didn't show it on her face due to years of acting. She walked up to Genzo and Nijiko, asking them the same question. "Honestly, Nami, you of all people are asking that? I think by now you should know your friend's handiwork." Nijiko answered her. The girl sighed, "I think curiosity got the better of me." During this time, Genzo kept quiet. Nami and Nijiko began to walk together till they reached the cliff of the island, where they saw a small grave. Nami sat in front of the grave as she spoke to it. "Hello Belmir. I know it's been a while since I talked to you, but I finally did it. I finally managed to gather the amount needed to buy this village." Nijiko's eyes widened as she said, "You're kidding." Nami shook her head as she said, "My new captain gave some of the money he and his girlfriend have been saving for their trip, and it managed to up the total." Nijiko smiled, "Well, that's great, but I kinda have some bad news for you." Nami looked at her as Nijiko told her what happened, and she could only say, "What?" Back at Arlong Park, Hachi was sitting on the rocks roasting a wild boar. He stood up and yelled, "Moo, it's time for lunch." The fishman waited for a bit, but the creature he was calling for never appeared. Unbeknownst to him, the creature did emerge from its lair. However, it sniffed something else and followed it. On the boat with Luffy and the others, Luffy was now sitting with Robin beside him as they both enjoyed their lunch with both Sanji and Zoro. However, due to their love antics, Zoro was having a hard time eating, not from them but from the love cook, who was crying rivers over how unfair it was for Luffy to have someone like Robin in his life. Zoro looked at him. "Can you stop? I'm trying to eat my meal in peace, and your stupid ramblings are disturbing the peace, you perverted cook." This was all that it took for the fire of anger to ignite inside Sanji, who looked at Zoro and said, "What did you say, you second-class swordsman?" A tick formed on Zoro's head. "Care to repeat that, curly brow?" This caused the two men to jump on each other as they both tried to beat the crap out of each other, while Robin shook her disappointedly. Suddenly the water around began to move. They looked around, unable to understand what happened, when a huge shadow covered the ship. They all looked behind them only to see a huge monster that looked like a huge cowfish. He looked down at them, or more specifically at their food. This caused the guys to yell, "It's a sea monster." Luffy looked stunned as he remembered the coast guard of their island. "Wow, that's so huge compared to the one on my island." Robin could only nod as she marveled at the sight in front of her. Sanji looked at it as he began to think of ways to cook it efficiently. "Cow, and it swims, you don't see that every day." Robin added, This thing doesn't belong here. If I'm not mistaken, this cowfish is from the Grand Line, and its size is far greater than any sea king I ever saw." The huge beast put its head down as it began to sniff the food. This caused Luffy to go into a panic as he yelled, "It's after our food." Don't worry, I'll protect it. The boy then stretched his arm back and yelled, "Gum Gum Pistol." This caused the beast to groan in pain as it was thrown back into the seaweed. "Never try to come after my food ever again." This made Zoro facepalm, wondering why did he end up with a glutton for a captain. Did you have to pick a fight with monster, Luffy? They looked only to see the monster is up and running. This time Zoro unsheathed his sword as he said, "At least next time, let me be part of the fun." Both Zoro and Luffy were quickly kicked in the head as Sanji yelled, "You freaks of nature, don't attack something that only wants to eat since it's hungry." Sanji knew that hungry is something that can't be helped, and since he's a chef, he must feed others, whether be it people or animals for that matter. The gentle chef approached the beast. "I'm sure you're injured and that's why you came to us." He held his hand to the huge thing, ushering it to eat, but the monster then opened its huge mouth and was about to eat. Sanji kicked it. "Die." The huge beast was then launched into the air and landed in the water. Zoro scoffed. "What happened to feed those who are hungry? Did you back away so quickly?" Sanji looked at him with an annoyed expression as he replied, "If you weren't looking, that thing was about to bite my hand off." Momoa raised from the water a sit, roared and lunged for the small vessel, as Sanji said, "Huh, looks like it came for seconds. I'll be happy to oblige." The man jumped into the air under the thing's neck. "Collier," he said before kicking Momoa under its neck, "shoot." And with that Momoa crumbled into the water as Robin looked at it with a small frown, saying, "They could have thrown the food for it to eat." Back at Arlong Park, the huge fish man looked around in anger as he was about to destroy everything in his path. He was still angry that the human attacked him. One of his subordinates said, "Boss, you need to calm down. You can't let one lowly human get to you." Arlong looked at him as he replied, "I'll only calm down when I have his head under my feet." Someone then said to him, "Then it's your lucky day. We managed to catch him before he escaped from the island, and we thought that you would have the honor of killing him." Arlong looked at the human in front of the human who was shivering in fear inside of Chu's grip. Arlong smirked. "Where's all that macho that you showed at the village? Did it disappear when you saw me for real? You know, killing you would really be an insult to me. I don't think I can even look at you due to your current look." Usopp smiled as he tried to save his life. "Well, how about you let me go then? I mean, there's no one point in killing me. And what happened at the village is just my people's way of saying hello to each other." Chu then punched him, saying, "Do you think that's really going to work on us, you filthy ass?" Arlong looked at Chu and said, "Go and kill him." Usopp began to panic till someone yelled, "What's going on here?" Usopp smiled in relief as he saw Nami approach the park. He yelled, "Nami, help me. These people are insane. They want to kill me." Nami looked at him with little care in her eyes. "Why should I help you? You're just one of the idiots that I robbed blind." She laughed a little. "Please, don't tell me you came all this way to bring me back. That's really sad if you ask me." Though on the outside she was laughing, on the inside, it was a different story altogether. She was nervous as hell trying to find a way to save this idiot's life without exposing herself. Usopp, who didn't catch the memo, yelled, "What? I'm your friend Nami. The only reason we came here was to help you, and now you're betraying us." Usopp at this point didn't believe that Nami played them all for idiots. The girl laughed, clapping her hands. "Well done. I used you and your pathetic crew of ragtag pirates to get what I want, and that's the money to fulfill my agreement with Arlong, and first thing tomorrow he'll have them. But did you honestly believe that I thought as any of you as friends?" Nami was mentally crying that the idiot didn't get what she was trying to do, but that was a problem for later. Arlong meanwhile went pale. He heard Nami's words. She managed to collect all the money needed to fulfill their agreement, but that means he has to let her go. The problem with that theory was that it wasn't happening in a million years, so he pushed his thoughts to find a solution for this problem aside as he smirked at Usopp. "See this little human?" Arlong pointed to Nami's shoulder where her Arlong mark was. "She's one of us. Hell, she is one of the most vicious people I have ever known. She's ruthless. She's ready to kill her own mother just to have money." Usopp looked at Nami, who looked uncomfortable. He finally understood that Nami was merely acting, seeing how she zoned out when her mother was mentioned, but he was returned to the world of the living as Arlong said, "Now what to do you? How'd I kill you? Should I hang you? Or should I cut your feet and legs off, and leave you to dry off just to make an example out of you?" Usopp paled in fear as he heard the man plotting his death in so many different ways. Usopp quickly blurted in fear, "You don't want to do that, or you'll suffer the consequences." He didn't know what came over him, but the shocked face of Nami was all he saw as he understood that he made things even worse, and if there was any chance of survival he managed to blow it at this moment. Arlong just laughed hard as he looked at him, and said smugly, "Oh please, tell me what are those consequences that I should be very afraid of human? I bet it's something so horrifying that I won't see it coming." Arlong wrapped his arm around Usopp as he said, "Now go ahead and tell me." The boy gulped as he mentally berated himself, "My captain will come for you, and he will beat the living snot out you and your fishmen if you harm a hair on my head," Usopp declared, but his feet were shaking, taking away the effect of the threat. Arlong laughed, "If that's all, then let him come, I'll tear him to ribbons." Usopp looked at him, saying with fear evident in his voice, "I wouldn't so confident if I were you. My captain managed to defeat Don Krieg, the same man that you used to avoid. This caused Arlong's laughter to die as he was reminded of a sore topic. On one of his ventures outside the island, he came across Krieg and they fought, but the man tricked him and managed to force them to retreat. One of Arlong's subordinates looked at Usopp with anger as some tried to attack him, but Arlong lifted his hand saying, "Anything else before I kill you, human." Usopp knew right now that he was one step away from death's door, so he had to pull all the stunts he had. Plus, my captain's first mate is the pirate hunter Zoro, and we're tight. So you want to mess with the friend of a man known as a demon in human skin. The mere mention of Zoro's name caused goosebumps to travel through the lower members of the Fishman pirates. Even Arlong was curious about him. Is that so? Then let him come. I always wanted to fight with a human who can keep up. This caused Usopp's face to pale as he heard Arlong's words, and realized that his words had had the opposite effect. Arlong looked at him. "Alright, I decided how to kill you." He was cut off by a shout. "Wait, don't." Everyone looked back at Nami, shocked that she stopped Arlong as one of the fishmen asked themselves if Nami was going to betray them. Karubi quickly voiced his opinion. "Are you planning to betray us, Nami?" The girl scoffed. She never liked the manta ray fishman. He was always skeptical of her and just wanted to kill her. He had ridiculous views about humans. To her, Arlong was a human rights activist when she compared him to his lieutenant. "No, and you know there's no reason to betray when I'm one day away from buying this village." Karubi scoffed. He always hated the girl aside from the fact that she was human. She was also cunning as a cat waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "No, I wanted to be the one that does the honor of killing this fool." She looked at Usopp dead in the eyes. Perhaps, this would work as a warning for that captain of High. Arlong smirked. "Well, why didn't you say so?" He walked and handed her a knife saying, "Go for it." Usopp looked at her as he said, "Nami, don't do something that you'll regret later on. Put that knife away, so we can talk about this peacefully." He didn't have a chance to finish what he was saying as Nami was right in front of him as she plunged the knife toward him saying, "This is for the best." She also whispered something to him as he clutched his abdomen, taking a few steps back, and fell into the ocean. Arlong laughed as he patted Nami on the back saying, "Well done, Nami. Heartless as ever." The girl didn't say anything as she walked away with the knife in her hand. She looked back and said, "I'll be here tomorrow with the money." She then walked to her home. Arlong frowned as he walked to Hachi, who was watching the entire thing, and told him to go bring him someone. Off the coast of Konami Islands, a small ship could be seen hauled by a huge sea cow. Luffy sat in front of the ship as he yelled, "Nami, here I come to help you."